It was the kind of day that felt like it might slip away unnoticed. The sun was high, but the air was cool, as if it wasn't sure what season it wanted to be. People strolled along the sidewalks, some in light jackets, others in t-shirts, taking in the random hum of city life. A few birds circled lazily above, their shadows stretching across the grass at the park where Micah Reed sat on the weathered bench, staring down at the chessboard in front of him. His fingers hovered over the pieces, unsure for a moment, but then his small hand moved with determination. The crowd that had gathered around the makeshift park chessboard didn't seem to notice at first. They were too focused on the teenager seated across from him, a confident young woman who was making waves in the chess world. Madison Pierce, 18, poised, and a reigning national champion. She was sitting up straight, her eyes sharp, almost calculating every move with the precision of a machine. But today, as the light from the late afternoon sun caught her dark hair, she looked more like a predator than a player. "This kid doesn't stand a chance," someone whispered in the crowd. The spectators leaned in, watching closely, waiting for the moment when Madison would do what she always did, destroy the competition. Her reputation as an unbeatable force in the world of chess had spread across the city like wildfire, and people gathered just to see her play. Yet, here she was, playing a game with an 8-year-old boy from the neighborhood who, according to his tattered hoodie and scuffed sneakers, looked like he didn't belong. Micah Reed wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this park, not in this game, and certainly not across from Madison Pierce, whose victories had made her a household name in the chess community. He was just a kid, an 8-year-old who had learned the game in the most unlikely of places, the corner of his local community center, where an old homeless man named Mr. Reggie had taught him the strategies of the board. Micah wasn't a prodigy, not by the standards that the chess world held. But there was something about him that made him different. Something about the way he saw the game, the way his mind moved pieces with a confidence that belied his age. Madison leaned forward, her fingers poised over her queen. "Your move, kid," she said with a smirk, clearly enjoying herself. The crowd chuckled, a few people already pulling out their phones, preparing to record what was going to be yet another one of her countless victories. They expected it to be a quick win, something they could all share online and boast about later. Micah didn't respond immediately. He had been thinking carefully, his eyes locked on the board, taking in every possibility. The pieces were set, but his mind was racing through the moves, calculating faster than the average person would be able to follow. He didn't need to look at the crowd or Madison, he only had eyes for the game. His fingers tapped the edge of his knight. Knight to e5. The move was simple, yet it shifted the energy in the air. Madison raised an eyebrow, glancing down at the board. Her queen was still in the center, unthreatened, her piece standing tall, dominant. But Micah had done something unusual. He wasn't just moving pieces aimlessly, he was setting a trap. A trap that, on most days, no one would have noticed. A trap that would have been impossible for someone with less experience to pull off. Madison blinked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face for just a moment. She quickly covered it with a smile, but Micah saw it. That momentary hesitation. It was all the confirmation he needed. The crowd leaned in closer, their murmurs growing louder. People began to whisper things like, "Is she going to lose?" and "This kid's got skills." Some even laughed nervously, as though they couldn't believe what they were seeing. But then it happened. Madison made a move. A seemingly small one, moving her queen a few squares to the left, but it was enough to fall right into the trap Micah had set. A few pieces later, and the board had shifted drastically. Now, Madison's queen was cornered, her once powerful position rendered useless. Micah's fingers hovered over the board again. He could hear the whispers behind him, the hushed tones that grew louder as they realized what he was about to do. His heart was racing, but his face remained calm, even calm enough to make a quiet joke. "Check," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but loud enough for everyone to hear. The moment the word left his lips, the tension in the air seemed to snap. Madison's eyes flicked to the board, and she froze. For the first time, her perfect facade cracked. Her queen was in check, and there was no easy way out. The crowd fell silent, their phones momentarily forgotten as they watched this young boy, this nobody from nowhere, pull off a move that no one had expected. Madison's hand hovered over her pieces. She looked at the board, studied it from every angle, trying to find a way to escape, but the path had narrowed, and time was running out. Every second felt like an eternity. Micah's quiet confidence had rattled her. She could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on her, expecting her to do what she always did, dominate. But she wasn't dominating now. Her hand moved, too quickly, too desperately. She attempted to escape with her king, but Micah's knight had already positioned itself perfectly. "Checkmate," Micah said, his voice steady and clear. The crowd gasped. For a moment, no one moved. No one even breathed. It was the kind of win that left people speechless, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The camera flashes from the crowd seemed to be coming from every direction. Madison's face went pale, her lips pressing together as she tried to regain her composure. Micah sat still, not celebrating, just quietly staring at the board as if he had done something routine. It wasn't routine. No one had seen anything like this before. The crowd erupted into applause. Some people were in shock, some in disbelief, others laughing nervously. It was a strange mix of emotions, amusement, astonishment, and even a little pity for Madison. She was supposed to be the unbeatable one. The queen of the chessboard. But here, on this random park bench, Micah Reed had done what no one thought possible, he had beaten her. As Madison stood up from the board, her eyes didn't meet Micah's. Instead, she looked out over the crowd, her mind racing. She had never lost in public before. She had never been so defeated. Not like this. "Who is this kid?" someone in the crowd muttered, breaking the silence. Micah didn't answer. He didn't need to. His win had already spoken for him. As the applause continued, Madison walked away without another word, leaving Micah alone at the board. The park was still buzzing, people already rushing to share the news on social media, but Micah didn't care about any of that. He didn't care about the sudden attention. He didn't even care about the victory. For the first time in a long while, Micah felt like he had finally found a place where he mattered. And it wasn't about the game. It was about what he had proven to himself. The pieces were set, and the game was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Micah Reed wasn't supposed to be a chess player. He wasn't supposed to be anything extraordinary. To most people, he was just another kid from the neighborhood, another face in the crowd, another forgotten soul in a city that never looked twice. But on this late afternoon in a small park near the corner of West Baltimore, he had done something that no one, including him, thought was possible. As the applause echoed around him, Micah stared down at the chessboard, still processing what had just happened. He wasn't sure what it felt like to win. It was strange, this feeling of having done something big, but not knowing if he could even explain it. He had never been the type of kid to crave attention, and yet, now, it seemed like the world was suddenly looking at him. He could hear the whispers of the crowd, their voices vibrating through the cool air. Who is he? How did he do that? I can't believe she lost to him. But the truth was, the world didn't really know Micah Reed. Not yet. Not the way he knew himself. To understand how he got here, you had to understand where he came from. Micah's life hadn't been easy, not in the way that people often think when they picture the struggles of a kid growing up in a rough neighborhood. His mother had left when he was just a baby, and his father, Leon Reed, had been locked up before Micah could even form memories of him. What Micah did remember was the absence. The emptiness in the house, the echo of footsteps that never came back. His grandma, Miss Lottie, was the one who had raised him. She worked the night shift cleaning offices downtown, and during the day, she took care of him as best as she could. Micah didn't remember being spoiled, but he did remember feeling safe in her arms, surrounded by her comforting words. But safety came at a cost. Miss Lottie was tough. She had to be. Life hadn't been kind to her, and it had certainly been harder to raise a grandson while working late every night. But despite the long hours and the worry that gnawed at her, she always made sure Micah had food on the table and a roof over his head. The apartment they lived in was small. 2 rooms, just enough space for the 2 of them, stacked with second-hand furniture and mismatched curtains. The kind of place people would pass by and not give a second thought to. In that tiny space, though, Micah had learned the one thing that would change his life forever: how to think. Miss Lottie wasn't a scholar, but she knew the power of the mind. "Your brain is your best friend, Micah," she often told him. "Everything else can be taken away, but no one can ever take what's in here." She'd tap his head gently, the weight of her words sinking deep into him. And so, he learned to use it. His mind, his one true weapon in a world that felt like it was stacked against him. Micah had tried baseball, basketball, and even some street football with the neighborhood kids, but none of those felt right. His small frame never gave him an edge in those sports. He wasn't fast enough, big enough, or bold enough to stand out. But one afternoon, when he was just 6 years old, he wandered into the community center, where an old man named Mr. Reggie sat, playing chess alone. At first, Micah didn't understand the game. The pieces seemed so foreign to him, so many different shapes and movements, each one representing something new. But something about it intrigued him. The idea that a game could be won with strategy, with patience, and with thought, was enough to pull him in. Mr. Reggie, a thin man with a grizzled beard and deep lines in his face, noticed the way Micah stared at the board, his curiosity flickering in his eyes. "You wanna learn, kid?" Mr. Reggie had asked, his voice gravelly and rough like the sound of an old car engine sputtering to life. Micah nodded, though he didn't really know what he was agreeing to. But that afternoon marked the beginning of a transformation. Mr. Reggie, who had once been a high school teacher before life's rough patches took him off the path, took Micah under his wing. He didn't teach him chess in the way most people expected, by going over moves or strategies. No, Mr. Reggie taught him something deeper. He taught him the value of seeing beyond the surface, of thinking ahead, of not letting the world around you dictate your choices. "Every piece on that board," Mr. Reggie had said, his finger tapping the chessboard, "has a purpose. You might not know it yet, but you've got to believe that even the smallest piece can change the game. That's life, boy." It was during these lessons that Micah learned how to control his own destiny. Not just in the game of chess, but in life. Chess became a lens through which he saw everything. The bullies at school who called him names were like pawns. They tried to push him around, but Micah knew their moves. The teachers who overlooked him were like knights and bishops, moving in patterns he could predict. The distractions, the drama, the noise, it was all part of the game, and Micah had learned how to block it out. But as much as Micah loved chess, the outside world didn't seem to care. He was still that kid from the wrong side of the tracks, the one whose family history seemed like a story already written, whose future was expected to be full of the same struggles. No one paid attention to a kid like him, especially not a kid who spent his time thinking about games like chess instead of the things most kids his age thought about: school, friends, or even just getting by. But then came the day he found himself sitting across from Madison Pierce in that park, playing the game of his life, and doing something that no one had ever expected. That was the day things started to change. That was the day the world would begin to take notice of Micah Reed. And now, as he sat at that chessboard, listening to the soft murmur of the crowd around him, he couldn't help but feel like he had finally made a move that mattered. The days that followed Micah Reed's shocking victory over Madison Pierce were a blur. It was like the world had suddenly taken a much sharper focus, and everything he did seemed to matter more. The local news stations were abuzz with the story, the video of him beating Madison going viral within hours of the match. People from all over the city were talking about it, and soon, the attention turned to him, the unknown chess prodigy who had taken down the reigning national champion. But Micah didn't feel like a prodigy. He felt like a kid who had gotten lucky. His chest still ached with the rush of excitement, but the fame that followed wasn't what he had imagined. It felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. Everywhere he went, people stared at him, asked for his autograph, and even snapped pictures. They didn't see the truth behind the victory. They didn't see the countless hours spent sitting on old, cracked benches in the community center, the lessons learned from Mr. Reggie, or the quiet battles fought inside his mind. He was just trying to get through the day, like everyone else. But now, it seemed like the world was expecting something from him. That Friday afternoon, Micah was back at the park. The weather was warm, but the air had a crispness to it, like the first signs of fall were approaching. He had come to play another casual game of chess, hoping to escape the noise. The bench where he had faced Madison was empty, and he took a seat, setting up his pieces slowly, absent-mindedly. As he set the board, he tried to clear his mind. The thought of the game didn't excite him as it used to, it felt like there was too much pressure now. He hadn't asked for any of this. Micah wasn't interested in fame. He wasn't a show-off or a talker. He was just a kid who liked chess and wanted to play for the love of it. But the world didn't seem to care about that. "You're the kid who beat Madison, right?" Micah looked up, startled. A group of teenagers had gathered around him, their phones already out, snapping pictures of him like he was some kind of rare animal in a zoo. One of them, a tall boy with a beanie, smirked down at him. "Hey, I saw the video, man." "That was insane," another said, their voice full of excitement. Micah didn't know how to respond. He had never been good at talking to people, especially strangers. But it seemed like the world wanted to talk to him now. The pressure was starting to mount, and he could feel the weight of the expectations weighing on him. He didn't want to be the kid who was always that guy who beat Madison. He just wanted to play. But it wasn't that simple. "Yeah, I guess I'm him," Micah muttered, trying to sound casual, even though his heart was racing. He began arranging his pieces again, hoping the crowd would lose interest and leave him alone. But they didn't. Instead, a few of the teens sat down across from him. One of them, a girl with curly hair, raised an eyebrow. "So, what's your next move?" she asked, a little sarcastic. "Gonna beat another big shot player?" Micah's hands froze over the pieces. He had never been good at boasting or even discussing his wins. To him, it was never about the accolades, it was about the game, the strategy. He hated the idea of being put on a pedestal, of having to live up to some impossible expectation. "I don't know," he said, his voice quiet, almost as if he were talking to himself. "It's just a game. I don't need to prove anything." The group of teens exchanged looks, confused. One of the boys snickered. "Come on, man, don't tell me you're not planning on doing something big. Everyone's talking about you. You're the next big thing." Micah shook his head, his chest tightening. He felt exposed, the spotlight too bright for someone who wasn't used to it. All he wanted was to go home, back to the quiet space where he could think and breathe. But it wasn't that simple anymore. The world wasn't going to let him fade into the background. As they continued to pepper him with questions, Micah suddenly remembered Mr. Reggie's words. "The world's always going to expect you to be something you're not. Don't let it change you." The old man had been right, and suddenly Micah realized how hard it was to stay true to himself when everyone else seemed to want a piece of him. He moved a pawn forward, his mind not fully in the game. The teens were still talking, the noise of their voices swirling around him like a cloud. But he wasn't listening. He wasn't even thinking about the game anymore. What he didn't realize was that the pressure wasn't just coming from the outside. It was creeping into his own mind. The expectations. The success. Everyone expected him to keep winning. Everyone expected him to be something he wasn't sure he could be. And then, just as Micah thought the tension couldn't get worse, he saw her. Madison Pierce, walking across the park toward him. She was with a group of her friends, laughing and chatting, looking every bit the confident, national champion she had been before that fateful game. When she saw Micah, her eyes locked onto him. For a brief moment, he felt a pang of doubt. She had been gracious in defeat, but he knew that deep down, she had to be wondering what had happened. What went wrong? Why did she lose to a kid who wasn't even on her radar? Madison stopped in front of him, her smile forced but polite. "Micah, right?" she asked, her voice warmer than he had expected. He nodded, unsure of what to say. "I just wanted to congratulate you," she said, her tone almost too pleasant. "That was an incredible game. Not many people can say they beat me." "Thanks," Micah said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to. I mean, it wasn't supposed to happen like that." Madison's eyes softened for a second, but the sharpness returned almost immediately. "Look, I know what this must feel like. But don't get too caught up in all this hype. People will start calling you the next big thing, but trust me, kid, there's a lot more to the game than one victory. You'll see." Micah wanted to tell her that he already knew that, but something about the way she said it made him doubt himself. He didn't want to be the next big thing. He just wanted to play. The group of teens that had gathered around him seemed to notice the conversation and stepped back, almost giving Madison space. She gave him a final, polite nod and turned to walk away, leaving Micah with more questions than answers. Was she just being friendly? Or was there a hint of resentment in her words? The pressure had mounted, and now it felt like everyone was expecting him to do the impossible. To prove that the victory wasn't a fluke. But what if he couldn't? What if the next game, the next challenge, wasn't something he could win? Suddenly, the game seemed less important. The tension was unbearable, and Micah realized that with every move he made, the stakes weren't just the pieces on the board anymore. The stakes were his own identity. The pressure to keep winning. To keep proving that he belonged. And it was suffocating. The following week was a whirlwind. After Madison's visit to the park, the tension in Micah's life only intensified. He couldn't escape the buzz, the constant reminders of his win, and the expectations that came with it. Everywhere he went, someone was talking about him. It was as if the world had placed a target on his back, and every move he made was under the microscope. The game was no longer just about the pieces on the board, it was about the persona that had emerged around him. Micah was becoming a local celebrity, people wanted to watch him play, to see if he could repeat his shocking win. The phone calls started coming in from local media outlets, asking for interviews, asking if he was ready for the big leagues. But Micah wasn't ready. In fact, he wasn't sure he ever would be. He didn't want this fame, this new life where every action seemed to matter. It felt like he was walking a tightrope, and one wrong move could send him crashing down. It wasn't just the media. The kids at school treated him differently too. They would crowd around him in the halls, offering to be his chess buddy, or asking if they could be his trainer. Everyone wanted to be a part of his rise, but none of them really understood what it was like to be inside his head. One afternoon, after a particularly draining day at school, Micah sat down at the bus stop, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on him. The evening sun was dipping low on the horizon, casting long shadows on the pavement. He leaned back, letting the quiet moment of solitude surround him, wishing for a way to escape all of the noise. Then, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Reggie. "Got a new challenge for you. Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m. Got something important to show you." Micah's heart skipped a beat. Despite everything that had been going on, despite all the pressure, Mr. Reggie was the one person who had never treated him like a sensation or a pawn in some grand game. Mr. Reggie had always seen him as Micah, not the kid who beat Madison Pierce. The thought of seeing him again, of getting away from the overwhelming expectations, was a welcome relief. The next day, at 3 p.m. sharp, Micah was sitting in the usual spot at the community center. The smell of old books and polish lingered in the air, the same scent he had grown accustomed to over the years. He watched as Mr. Reggie shuffled in, his old sneakers making the familiar scuffing sound against the tile floor. "You ready, kid?" Mr. Reggie asked with a twinkle in his eye. Micah nodded, his nerves starting to settle for the first time in what felt like forever. Without another word, Mr. Reggie led him to the back room, where a large wooden chessboard sat in the center of the table. But this was no ordinary game. The board was massive, and the pieces were unlike anything Micah had ever seen, giant, intricately carved knights and rooks, with small tags attached to each one. "Now," Mr. Reggie said, his voice low but filled with excitement, "I've got something special for you." Micah's eyes widened. "What is this?" "This is the big leagues, kid. You think you can handle it?" Micah felt a rush of both excitement and anxiety. The pieces on the board seemed to mock him, their size making everything feel more real, more significant. He had beaten Madison Pierce, an accomplishment that had sent waves through the city, but this? This was something else. Mr. Reggie continued, "This is a real tournament. I've been talking to some people. I've got a spot for you in the upcoming high school chess league tournament, but you'll need to be ready. You'll be going up against players who have been practicing their entire lives for this. This will be the real test." Micah's stomach twisted. He hadn't expected this. Sure, he'd won a single game, a spectacular win, but he was far from prepared to face seasoned competitors. He didn't have years of experience, nor did he have the confidence that a player like Madison had. But Mr. Reggie had a way of making even the most daunting challenges seem like something worth taking on. "I can't do this," Micah said, his voice faltering. "I've never even played in a tournament. I'm just some kid who got lucky." Mr. Reggie's eyes softened, and for the first time, he placed a hand on Micah's shoulder. "Listen to me, Micah. Nobody's asking you to be perfect. They're not expecting a champion. But you've got something that most people don't have, you've got the heart to keep playing, even when you don't think you can. That's what separates the good from the great. It's not about being perfect, it's about finding a way to keep moving, no matter the odds." Micah took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he looked at the enormous chessboard. The challenge before him felt impossible. The weight of it threatened to crush him. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't even sure he wanted it. But then, he remembered the feeling of sitting down across from Madison Pierce. The challenge, the excitement, the uncertainty. He remembered the way he had felt when he made that final move, the rush of knowing he had achieved something no one had expected. Maybe this wasn't about proving something to others. Maybe this was about proving something to himself. "I'll do it," Micah said, the words leaving his mouth before he could even fully process them. He wasn't sure where the courage had come from, but it was there, pulsing in his chest. He would take this journey, wherever it led. Mr. Reggie's smile spread across his face, and he patted Micah on the back. "That's the spirit, kid. But don't expect it to be easy. You've got a long road ahead. And you'll need to trust yourself when things get tough." As Micah sat down in front of the giant chessboard, he could feel the weight of what was coming next. This wasn't just a game anymore. This was the beginning of something bigger. The journey wasn't going to be easy, but it was a journey he had to take. And for the first time in a long while, Micah felt a spark of excitement, real excitement, rising within him. The real test was about to begin. The day of the tournament finally arrived. Micah had barely slept the night before, the anticipation gnawing at him like a restless beast. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. He had never been this nervous in his life. He had won one game, one incredible, unbelievable game. But now he was walking into a tournament, where players much more experienced than him would be sitting across the board, eyes sharp, strategies honed, expecting nothing less than perfection. Micah stood in front of his mirror, trying to put on a brave face. His clothes felt too tight, his shoes too stiff. He could feel the weight of the expectations hanging over him, a suffocating pressure that he didn't know how to shake off. For a moment, he almost wanted to back out. He wanted to say, "I'm just a kid. I shouldn't be here." But then, he remembered Mr. Reggie's words, "It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up, no matter what. It's about pushing through even when you think you can't." With that, Micah straightened up, took a deep breath, and grabbed his chest set. Today was the day he had to face whatever came next. At the tournament hall, the air was thick with nervous energy. The room was filled with the hum of whispered conversations, the shuffle of feet, and the sound of chess pieces being moved across boards. The competitors were a mix of high school students, all of them older than Micah, all of them looking like seasoned veterans of the game. They walked with a quiet confidence, the kind of confidence that comes with years of practice and countless victories. Micah felt small in comparison. He found his seat at one of the tables, surrounded by players who seemed to have no fear, no doubt. As he set up his board, he noticed a few people glancing over at him, some curious, others perhaps sizing him up, wondering if the boy who had beaten Madison Pierce could truly hang with the big leagues. The first few rounds passed in a blur. Micah's heart raced with every move he made, every glance at his opponent, every moment of doubt. But somehow, he held his own. He wasn't winning every game, but he wasn't losing either. He managed to hold his ground, pushing forward, trying to remember everything Mr. Reggie had taught him. The pressure was real, and it was crushing. Every mistake felt like it could be the end. And every time he thought about giving up, he remembered the faces of the people who had believed in him. He could hear their voices in his mind, "You can do this, Micah." It wasn't just his name they were saying, it was the weight of their faith, their hope. And that hope, for the first time, began to feel like something he couldn't afford to let go of. Then, it happened. The game that would change everything. In the third round, Micah faced a girl named Erica Hayes. She was tall, with sharp features and an intense gaze that didn't leave Micah for a second. Her reputation preceded her. She was known for her relentless play style, her ability to anticipate moves with a frightening accuracy. She was everything Micah feared. And as they sat down across from each other, he could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. "Ready to lose, kid?" she asked, her voice cool, almost mocking. Micah didn't respond. Instead, he focused on the board in front of him. He had to think. He had to feel the game. His hands trembled as he moved his first pawn, but the moment he did, something shifted inside him. The pressure began to melt away, replaced by the quiet focus he hadn't felt in days. The game unfolded quickly. Erica was ruthless, moving her pieces with precision, attacking every gap Micah left open. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest with every move she made, but he kept his focus. He didn't think about the spectators watching from the sidelines. He didn't think about the expectations that weighed heavily on his shoulders. He only thought about the board, the pieces, and the moves that would determine his fate. Halfway through the game, Micah realized that he was losing ground. Erica had set up a devastating trap that Micah didn't see coming. He had fallen into it, like so many of the players he had studied before him. His thoughts raced. "I've lost. I can't do this. I should have backed out. I don't belong here." But just as the weight of that thought began to pull him under, something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to let it end this way. He wasn't going to let all the pressure, all the doubts, and all the expectations crush him. He thought back to that game against Madison. The moment he had made that final move, the way he had felt when he realized he had won. "I belong here," he thought. "I've worked for this. I'm not backing down." Micah took a deep breath. He scanned the board carefully, his mind racing, trying to find a way out of the trap. And then, in that quiet, almost surreal moment, he saw it, one move. One perfect move. His fingers hovered over the pieces as he prepared to make the move that would either seal his fate or give him a chance to stay in the game. The moment felt like an eternity. Are you just going to sit there all day? Erica's voice was sharp, but it didn't faze him. Micah finally made his move. His knight leapt across the board, cutting through Erica's defense with surgical precision. The board shifted, and suddenly, it was Erica who was on the back foot. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Micah had done it. He had turned the game around. But the real emotional climax came not from the victory itself, but from the realization that he had found something more important than just a win: belief in himself. The final moments of the game passed quickly, and when Micah delivered the final checkmate, the room fell silent. Erica sat back in her chair, stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Micah, on the other hand, was breathing heavily, every part of his body shaking from the rush of adrenaline. He had done it. He had beaten one of the best. But as he stood there, surrounded by the soft murmurs of awe from the crowd, it wasn't the victory that mattered most to him. It was the fact that he had overcome his fear, his doubt, and the crushing weight of expectation. Micah had finally proved something to himself. Micah sat in the quiet aftermath of the game, the buzzing of the crowd fading into a distant hum. His hands were still shaking, his chest still heaving with the adrenaline of the moment. He had won. He had beaten Erica Hayes, one of the best players at the tournament. But as he looked around the room, seeing the proud smiles on the faces of the spectators and hearing the murmurs of approval from his peers, something strange lingered inside him. He had expected the victory to feel different, like a validation of everything he had worked for, a tangible marker that proved he was capable. But instead, a new weight settled over him. It wasn't a burden of pressure, but a realization that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The applause echoed in his ears, but it felt distant. He could hear his name being called, but it was as if it was happening to someone else, not him. The recognition didn't matter as much as he thought it would. What mattered was that he had faced his fears and had come through on the other side stronger than he had ever imagined. Micah slowly stood up from his seat and shook Erica's hand, an unspoken respect passing between them. She smiled faintly, but there was no bitterness in her eyes. Instead, there was something like acknowledgement, the recognition of the challenge he had presented her. "Good game," she said, her voice steady, even though her words carried weight. "You've got something special. Keep going." Micah didn't respond at first. He just nodded, still processing everything that had just happened. For a moment, he stood frozen, his mind replaying the pivotal moments of the game, the way his knight had swooped in, the way everything had changed in a single move. But now, as he stood there in the midst of the tournament hall, surrounded by strangers and the quiet murmur of conversations, he began to think about what it had all meant. He had won. But it wasn't just about winning. It was about the journey he had taken to get here, and the person he had become along the way. Hours later, after the tournament had ended, Micah found himself sitting alone on the bleachers outside the gymnasium. The evening air was cool, the sky slowly shifting from gold to purple as the sun set behind the trees. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, feeling the weight of everything that had happened that day. Mr. Reggie had been there, of course, sitting in the audience, watching, waiting for the moment when Micah would make his move. When the final game ended, Mr. Reggie had made his way through the crowd, his face beaming with pride. "You did it, kid," Mr. Reggie had said, clapping Micah on the back. "I knew you had it in you." But even as Mr. Reggie congratulated him, Micah couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The victory was hollow in some ways, because it wasn't the end of his journey. The true challenge, he realized, had never been about beating the best players, it had been about conquering his own insecurities, his own doubts. It had been about proving to himself that he could face the storm, stand tall, and fight for what he wanted. As he sat on the bleachers, alone with his thoughts, Micah closed his eyes and thought back to the beginning, when he had first sat down at that dusty old chessboard in the park, facing Madison Pierce. He had never imagined that a single game would change his life. He had never imagined that it would lead him here, to a high school chess tournament, surrounded by players who were decades ahead of him. But now, with the experience fresh in his mind, Micah understood that this moment was only one chapter in a much larger story. The next challenge would come. It always did. He smiled to himself. He wasn't done yet. The journey was far from over. The next morning, Micah woke up early, as he always did, before the world had fully risen. The house was quiet, and the morning sun filtered softly through the blinds, casting a warm, golden light across the room. He stretched and rubbed his eyes, feeling the grogginess of sleep slip away as the events of the previous day began to resurface. Today was a new day, and with it came new possibilities. The world outside was wide open, full of opportunities, but also full of uncertainties. Micah wasn't sure where this journey would take him next. He didn't know if he would ever be as good as the other players at the tournament, or if his name would ever become as well known as Madison Pierce's. What he did know, however, was that he had taken the first step. And that was enough. He walked into the kitchen where his mother was already making breakfast, the familiar scent of pancakes filling the air. She looked up as he entered, offering him a warm smile. "How did it go yesterday, Micah? I saw you on the news." Micah sat down at the table, his stomach still a little unsettled from the previous day. But there was a lightness in his chest that hadn't been there before. "It went well," he said, grinning. "I won." His mother's eyes lit up, and she set a plate of pancakes in front of him. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice soft but full of pride. "You've come so far. But remember, it's not just about the wins. It's about how you play the game." Micah took a bite of his pancakes, savoring the comfort of home. His mother was right. It wasn't about the wins. It was about how he faced the challenges, how he kept moving forward even when things seemed impossible. He looked out the window, watching the sun rise higher in the sky, casting its warm glow over the world. There was so much more out there for him to discover, so many more challenges to face. But for the first time, he felt ready for them. Micah wasn't just a kid who had beaten a chess player. He was a kid who had learned to believe in himself. And that, he realized, was the most important victory of all. The days following the tournament were both exhilarating and exhausting for Micah. His victory over Erica Hayes had put him in the spotlight, but with the attention came an overwhelming flood of new emotions. There were moments of celebration, sure, but there were also moments where doubt crept in again. He found himself staring at the chessboard late at night, unsure of where to go next. He had come so far, defeating Madison Pierce, making it through the tournament, and earning the respect of some of the most experienced players. But with all of this, there was a gnawing feeling at the back of his mind: what was the next step? Was this enough? At school, it seemed like everyone knew who he was now. The whispers followed him down the hallways, and he caught students glancing at him from across the room. They were curious, some even eager to challenge him. But Micah wasn't sure if he was ready to take on any more pressure. Still, despite the doubts, there was something about chess that kept him coming back. It was a language he understood, one that spoke directly to his mind, a puzzle he could piece together piece by piece. But now, it felt different. There was a new sense of expectation, a weight he hadn't felt before. Then, one afternoon after school, it all came crashing down. It happened in the school library. Micah had been there alone, absorbed in a chess strategy book that Mr. Reggie had given him. The room was quiet except for the soft rustle of pages, the occasional click of a keyboard from a student in the corner, and the faint sound of the clock ticking on the wall. He had come to appreciate these moments of peace. But that afternoon, a voice interrupted the silence. Well, if it isn't the chess prodigy himself. Micah looked up to see a familiar face. It was Kayla Sinclair, a senior and one of the top students in the school. She wasn't particularly known for being friendly, often keeping to herself and carrying an air of confidence that seemed to intimidate everyone around her. Micah had heard her name before, especially when the topic of chess came up. Kayla was known for being a formidable player, the kind of opponent who could dismantle anyone with ease. But Micah hadn't expected to see her here, of all places. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the sudden tension in the air. Kayla smirked, her eyes gleaming with a competitive edge. "You're Micah Reed, right? The kid who beat Madison Pierce and made waves at that tournament." "Impressive, I'll admit." She leaned casually against the shelf, her arms crossed. "But let's be real. You're not on my level." Micah felt a flicker of irritation, but he kept his expression neutral. "I never said I was," he replied, trying to keep his cool. Kayla's smirk widened. "I'm sure you didn't. But I've been watching you, kid. You're good, no doubt about that. But good isn't enough. Not when you're up against someone like me." The words stung more than Micah cared to admit. He had heard enough of this kind of talk from other kids before, people who tried to make him feel small, dismissing his accomplishments. But something about Kayla's tone felt different. It wasn't just about beating him. It was about proving that he didn't belong. "What do you want?" Micah asked, keeping his voice steady despite the rising frustration. Kayla smiled, a cold and calculating smile. "I want a game. Just the two of us, one-on-one. No distractions. Let's see if you can really handle the pressure of someone who's been playing chess since they could walk." Micah stood up, the book in his lap falling to the table. "Are you challenging me?" "You bet I am," she said, her tone dripping with confidence. "Let's see if you've got what it takes to really earn that title of chess prodigy. I'm sure you're great at beating people like Madison, but you've never faced someone like me." Micah's mind raced, his heart beating faster. Part of him wanted to back away, to avoid the challenge. He wasn't sure if he was ready to face someone as seasoned as Kayla. But at the same time, something in him refused to back down. "Fine," he said, a sense of determination settling over him. "Let's play." Kayla led him to one of the empty study tables, setting up the board with deliberate precision. She moved like a professional, each piece placed with care, as if every move had been calculated long before the game even began. Micah sat across from her, feeling the weight of her gaze. There was no easy way out of this. There was no beginner's luck this time. This was going to be a true test of everything he had learned. The game started slow, as both players tested each other's defenses, each move careful and deliberate. Micah kept his focus, trying to read Kayla's intentions, but her play style was nothing like he had faced before. She was methodical, calculating, and every move she made seemed to push him to the edge. She controlled the center of the board with ease, forcing Micah into uncomfortable positions, each piece he moved seeming to only worsen his situation. Micah felt the pressure mount with every passing minute. His heart pounded in his chest, his palms beginning to sweat. This wasn't a game he could afford to lose. Kayla's calm, confident demeanor made it clear that she saw him as nothing more than a stepping stone on her path to further greatness. She was determined to put him in his place. And then, in a pivotal moment, Micah made a mistake. It was subtle at first, just a small misstep, a slight miscalculation. But it was enough. Kayla seized the opportunity, advancing her pieces with ruthless efficiency. The walls began to close in on him. For a brief moment, Micah's confidence wavered. Doubts crept into his mind. What if she's right? What if I'm not as good as I thought? But then, he remembered something. He remembered the first time he had picked up a chess piece, the way he had learned to fight through the pressure, to keep playing even when he didn't know if he could win. He wasn't going to back down now. With a deep breath, Micah steadied himself. He focused on the board in front of him, pushing aside the noise in his head. This was just another game. And he was ready for it. The tension in the air felt thick as Micah stared down at the chessboard, his mind racing. Kayla's moves were precise, each piece sliding across the board with an almost surgical precision. Every time he tried to regain some control, she tightened the grip, forcing him into a corner he didn't want to be in. His pulse quickened, and his hand trembled slightly as he hovered over his knight, trying to predict her next move. Micah was aware of the crowd gathering around them now. Their whispered comments and hushed voices added to the pressure. Some were watching out of curiosity, others in awe. The game had become a spectacle, and suddenly, it wasn't just about him versus Kayla. It was about proving something to everyone else, and that terrified him. As much as he tried to focus on the game, a voice in his mind kept echoing. What if you lose? What will people think? Kayla didn't seem to have any of these doubts. Her eyes were fixed on him, intense and calculating. She knew how to play the crowd just as much as she knew how to play the game. And she was enjoying every moment of it. Not bad, Micah, she said casually, as if they weren't in the middle of a high-stakes match. But you're still a long way from being a real contender. You've got potential, but potential isn't enough to take down someone like me. Her words struck like a blow to his chest. She's right, he thought, momentarily thrown off by the weight of her statement. The pressure was mounting, and the weight of expectation, of having to prove himself in front of an audience, was making his moves feel clumsy and uncertain. The chessboard seemed to stretch farther and farther away from him, the pieces becoming blurry. For a moment, it wasn't just the game. It was everything, the weight of all the eyes watching, all the hopes he had placed on himself. It felt like it might all come crashing down. He took a deep breath, trying to focus. He had to block out the distractions. This wasn't about proving something to Kayla or the crowd. It was about proving something to himself. With a quick motion, Micah moved his rook forward, shifting his strategy. Kayla's eyes flickered with surprise, and for the first time in the game, she paused. Interesting move, she said, her voice laced with caution. For a split second, Micah saw a crack in her confident exterior. She wasn't expecting that move. And that, Micah realized, was the key. He'd been playing too defensively. He'd let her dictate the game, follow her rhythm. But now, it was his turn to control the flow. The shift was subtle but significant. Micah began to see the game differently. Instead of trying to react to Kayla's moves, he started thinking about what he could do to control her next one. He moved his queen forward, pushing her pieces back, forcing her into a position where she had fewer options. Kayla narrowed her eyes, clearly unsettled by his sudden change in strategy. She leaned forward, studying the board carefully. Micah could almost hear her mind working, calculating, weighing the consequences of every possible move. Micah's heart pounded in his chest as he studied the board in front of him. He had to keep going. There was no going back now. He couldn't afford to second-guess himself. Suddenly, the room seemed to fall silent. Even the crowd had quieted down, watching intently as the game reached its most critical point. Micah's mind was clear, his focus sharp. He could feel the pulse of the game, each move a beat, each decision leading him closer to something he couldn't yet name. Kayla's lips parted as if she was about to make a move, but she hesitated. She took a deep breath, clearly aware that she had underestimated him. Micah could see the shift in her demeanor, she was no longer certain. In that moment, he knew this was his chance. He had taken the momentum back. He wasn't just playing for the win anymore. He was playing for his own confidence, for his own belief in himself. He was playing to prove that he belonged in this world of chess, that he could stand tall alongside players like Kayla. He slid his knight across the board, positioning it in a place where it could attack her queen. It was a risky move, one that could leave him vulnerable if she saw through it, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. Kayla's eyes flickered with alarm. For the first time, she had no immediate countermove. Her queen was exposed, and Micah's knight was threatening her most powerful piece. Without a word, she moved her queen back, trying to shield it, but it was too late. Micah had gained the upper hand. His next move would put her into check, and with no way to defend, Kayla's position would collapse. The crowd gasped, and Micah's heart leaped in his chest. This was it. He had her. He made the final move, his knight taking down Kayla's queen, and for a moment, everything went still. Kayla stared at the board, her lips parted in disbelief. She had been beaten. Micah Reed, the kid who had only started playing chess a few months ago, had just defeated one of the top players in the school. The crowd erupted into applause, but Micah couldn't hear them. His pulse was still racing, his breath still shallow. He had done it. As the applause grew louder, Kayla looked at him, her eyes no longer filled with arrogance or superiority. Instead, there was respect. It was clear now that she understood what he had been working for all this time. And she acknowledged it. "Well played," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "You earned that one." Micah swallowed hard, his heart still beating wildly. He hadn't expected it to end like this, not this way, not with such a powerful comeback. But he had done it. He had faced the impossible and come out on top. For the first time in his life, Micah understood what it truly meant to be a competitor, to fight not just against others, but against your own doubts and limitations. The struggle wasn't over, it had only just begun. But today, he had won. And that victory, the one he had fought for with every ounce of determination, was one he would never forget. Micah couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph as he walked out of the library. The room still buzzed with whispers, students murmuring about his victory over Kayla Sinclair. As much as he tried to play it cool, a sense of disbelief still washed over him. He had actually done it. He had beaten one of the best players in the school. But as the high of victory began to settle, Micah noticed something else, an unfamiliar weight pressing down on his chest. It wasn't the exhaustion from the game, but something deeper, more uncomfortable. This victory, this win that had felt so sweet just moments ago, was quickly turning into a source of new pressure. The whispers followed him everywhere now. His classmates looked at him differently. They treated him like some kind of chess celebrity, a prodigy who had just risen to the top. And while some were genuinely impressed, others had started to look at him with a different sort of expectation. "Micah Reed, the chess champ," they would say, their voices tinged with awe or jealousy. "Can you really keep this up?" The weight of those questions began to wear on him. He wasn't sure what to do with the newfound attention. On one hand, he had worked so hard to get here. This was the moment he had dreamed about, the moment he'd hoped for when he first picked up a chess piece. But on the other hand, with this newfound recognition came the fear of not being able to live up to it. What if his next game was a disaster? What if he failed and all the hype crumbled around him? The more Micah thought about it, the more he realized that his battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. At school the next day, it felt like everyone knew who he was. As he walked down the hallway, he caught the eyes of his classmates. Some were nodding in approval, some were whispering to each other. But none of them seemed to care about the game itself. They were all focused on one thing, the label. Micah Reed. The chess champion. And with that label came a looming sense of responsibility. Suddenly, he wasn't just some kid who played chess for fun. He was the kid to watch. The one who had beaten Kayla Sinclair. And now, there was a looming question hanging in the air, can he do it again? As the day went on, the pressure only increased. Micah couldn't stop thinking about it. Every conversation he overheard seemed to be about him. The whispers followed him everywhere. He couldn't shake the feeling that everyone expected him to win again, expected him to be perfect. When he arrived at his locker before the afternoon classes started, he found an envelope waiting for him, taped to the metal door. Micah paused for a moment, feeling the familiar surge of uncertainty. He opened it carefully, unfolding the paper inside. The letter was brief, but to the point. "Micah. You've proven yourself in the last match, but the real challenge is ahead. Meet me at the park after school. We have unfinished business. Kayla Sinclair, ***. A chill ran down Micah's spine. This was it. The rematch. He could already feel the weight of Kayla's challenge pressing down on him. This time, it wouldn't be a simple game. It wouldn't just be for fun. This was her way of proving something, showing that her first defeat hadn't been a fluke. And now, Micah would have to prove that his victory wasn't just a lucky break. The rest of the day seemed to drag on in a haze. He couldn't focus in class, couldn't concentrate on anything but the challenge awaiting him after school. What if Kayla had something planned? What if she was going to come at him with a strategy he hadn't seen before? He had no idea what kind of pressure she would bring to the table, but the doubt was already creeping in. Could he handle it? Could he really keep up with someone like Kayla Sinclair, who had years of experience? By the time the school bell rang, signaling the end of the day, Micah felt exhausted, even before the game had begun. He made his way to the park, the weight of every step growing heavier as he approached the familiar chess table where they had first met. His palms were sweaty, his heart thumping in his chest. Kayla was already there, sitting across from the chessboard, her expression unreadable. She looked as confident as ever, but there was something different in her eyes now. A hint of something deeper, a mix of challenge and anticipation. "You showed up," she said, her voice low but with an edge of respect. "I was starting to think you'd back out." Micah stood across from her, the pressure mounting with every passing second. He didn't know how to respond, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Instead, he just nodded, the weight of the moment sinking in. He wasn't backing down. He couldn't afford to. This was his chance to prove that his victory wasn't a fluke. It was his chance to show everyone, including himself, that he deserved to be here. The game began, and immediately, Micah could feel the difference. Kayla wasn't holding back this time. Every move she made was sharp, decisive, a clear indication that she wasn't going to let him have another easy win. She pushed him into corners, forcing him to think faster, think harder. And yet, something was different. Micah wasn't the same player he had been a few days ago. He had learned so much since that first game with Erica, and now, with every move, he felt his confidence growing. He could read Kayla's strategies, anticipate her moves, and block her advances with a precision he hadn't thought himself capable of. The game stretched on, both of them testing each other, neither giving an inch. As Micah placed his bishop in a perfect position, threatening Kayla's king, he realized something that sent a shiver down his spine. The game wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about proving that he could stand strong under the pressure. It was about showing everyone, especially himself, that this victory wasn't a one-off. It was his new reality. For the first time, Micah felt the full weight of the challenge. This wasn't just a game against Kayla Sinclair. This was a battle for his place in the world of chess. And no matter how much pressure he felt, he knew there was no turning back. The game continued, and with every passing moment, the pressure on Micah mounted. The park around them, once filled with the hum of distant traffic and the chatter of others enjoying their afternoon, seemed to fade into the background. All that existed now was the chessboard between him and Kayla, each piece like a puzzle that demanded his full attention. It was no longer just a casual game, this felt like a battle of wills. Kayla was relentless, and her every move was calculated to make him second-guess himself. Micah had been playing chess for months now, and in that time, he had learned a lot. He wasn't the same player he had been when he first sat down with his sister Erica. He had grown stronger, more confident. But this was something different. This wasn't just about raw skill anymore, it was about reading the person across from you. And Kayla Sinclair was a master at mind games. As she moved her queen across the board, threatening one of his rooks, Micah felt a wave of doubt wash over him. He had played carefully so far, maintaining a solid defense, but Kayla's aggressive strategy was slowly wearing him down. The pieces were shifting in ways he hadn't anticipated, and each new move seemed to put him on the defensive. Feeling cornered, Micah? Kayla's voice was smooth, almost too calm. She was enjoying this, Micah could tell. She had a way of making her opponents feel like they were always one step behind, like they were always playing catch-up. It was like she knew exactly what he was thinking before he even made his move. Micah bit his lip, resisting the urge to let his frustration show. He had been in situations like this before, but something about Kayla's focus was different. It was as if she wasn't just trying to win a game, she was trying to break him mentally. The game had gone on for over an hour now. His initial advantage had slowly faded, and now, as he looked at the board, he realized he was in serious trouble. Kayla had maneuvered her pieces with surgical precision, and Micah's king was now exposed. It was a dangerous position, one that could lead to a checkmate if he didn't make the right move. His fingers hovered over his rook, but something didn't feel right. A chill crept up his spine, a feeling that the game had suddenly taken a darker turn. It was then that he noticed something. In the corner of his eye, he saw Kayla's smile, just a small twitch at the corner of her lips, barely noticeable, but enough to send a wave of unease through him. Was she toying with him? Had she been setting a trap all along? Check, she said suddenly, her voice low but filled with a quiet sense of triumph. Micah's heart skipped a beat. He quickly scanned the board, realizing that her queen had just cornered his king, and he had no way to escape the immediate threat. Kayla had done it, she had trapped him. Your move, she said, her tone unyielding. Micah's mind raced as he frantically searched for a way out. But no matter how he looked at it, the situation was bleak. Kayla had set up the perfect trap. Every move he could think of either led to his king being trapped further or left him open for a checkmate in the next few turns. But as the pressure mounted, a strange clarity seemed to wash over him. I can't lose. I won't lose. Micah gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to panic. He remembered what his sister, Erica, had told him so many times: the key to winning isn't just about knowing the game, it's about knowing your opponent. He wasn't just playing a game of chess, he was playing Kayla's mind games, and the rules of the game had just changed. He had to think differently. Taking a deep breath, Micah looked at the board again. He wasn't just going to play defense anymore. He had to start thinking offensively, anticipating what Kayla would do next. He had to use his opponent's overconfidence against her. In a split-second decision, Micah moved his knight to a position that, while not immediately freeing his king, put him in a much stronger position for a counterattack. Kayla raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by his move. I didn't think you had it in you, she said, her voice colder now, almost impressed. Micah didn't respond. He focused on the board, watching her closely as she made her next move. This time, it was a subtle shift. Kayla had underestimated him. She had expected him to panic, expected him to make a rash move. But Micah wasn't going to play into her hands anymore. The game was still tense, but something had shifted. For the first time, Micah felt like he was back in control, even if only for a moment. He was thinking clearly now, and Kayla was starting to look a little less certain. She was playing the same game, but he wasn't. As Kayla moved her knight forward to pressure his queen, Micah saw an opening. His heart raced as he made a daring move. His queen swept across the board, placing her directly in line to threaten Kayla's king. Kayla's eyes widened. She had not seen that coming. For the first time since the beginning of the game, Kayla seemed genuinely flustered. Micah had turned the tables. He had cornered her. Check, he said softly, his voice steady but filled with determination. Kayla stared at the board, her mind racing. The pieces on the board were aligned in such a way that Kayla's options were limited. She could move her king, but it would only lead to another check, and this time, Micah had the advantage. Kayla took a deep breath, and Micah could see the shift in her expression. The confident, almost mocking smile she had worn earlier had faded. She was beginning to realize that Micah had truly learned from their first game, that he was no longer the same player she had easily dismissed. Kayla moved her king, but it was a futile attempt. Micah moved his queen again, and for the second time, he called out the word that echoed in his mind like a victory cry. Check. This time, there was no escape. No last-minute trick or move that could save her. The board had shifted, and Micah Reed was on the verge of a shocking victory. The tension in the air was palpable as Kayla stared at the chessboard, her fingers hovering over her pieces, uncertain of the next move. Micah watched her carefully, his eyes never leaving the board. The moment had come. He had her cornered, but he knew he couldn't relax just yet. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. Kayla had been one of the best players in their school, and she wasn't going to give up without a fight. Her earlier confidence had disappeared, replaced by an intensity that matched his own. This game had escalated beyond just a rematch, it had become a personal test for both of them, and Kayla knew it. She wasn't just playing for victory anymore, she was playing for respect. She was playing to reclaim her pride. Micah's heart raced. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on his shoulders. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about proving to himself that he could handle the pressure, that he could rise above it and finish what he had started. He had taken on Kayla's challenge and managed to outmaneuver her at every turn. But now, he had to finish the game. One wrong move, and it could all unravel. Kayla finally made her move, sliding her king to the side in an attempt to escape the check he had placed on her. Her face was a mask of concentration, but there was something else in her eyes now, something that Micah hadn't seen before. It wasn't just determination. It was a flicker of desperation. Micah leaned in, studying the board with everything he had. Every muscle in his body seemed to tighten, his mind racing through every possible scenario. This was the moment that would define him as a player. He had spent countless hours practicing, learning from every loss, every mistake. And now, it all came down to this. He couldn't hesitate. Micah moved his queen across the board, trapping Kayla's king in a corner. For a split second, he felt the air leave the park, as if the world around them held its breath. The pieces on the board, which had once seemed like mere objects, now felt alive, charged with meaning. Every move he had made led to this point, this final moment. Checkmate, he said, his voice calm but firm. Kayla froze, her face pale as she stared at the board in disbelief. For a moment, she said nothing, her fingers trembling slightly as she ran them across the pieces. But there was no denying it, Micah had won. It wasn't just that he had defeated her. It was the way he had done it, each move deliberate, each play with purpose. He had never wavered. He had learned from every mistake, every loss, and now, it had all come together. Kayla finally let out a breath, the weight of defeat settling on her shoulders. She looked up at Micah, her eyes narrowing, but there was something different in her gaze now. Gone was the cocky smirk from their earlier games. Instead, there was a quiet respect in her eyes. "You really did it," she said, her voice almost inaudible. "You beat me. I didn't think it was possible." Micah felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him was elated, but there was also a sense of humility. This wasn't the victory he had imagined when he first thought about beating her. It was more than that. It was proof of everything he had worked for, but also of how far he had come. He wasn't the same boy who had first picked up a chess piece. He was someone different now, someone who had faced the pressure, faced the doubt, and come out on top. He stood up from the chess table, his legs shaky from the intensity of the game, but his mind sharp and clear. He turned to Kayla, who was still sitting there, her eyes on the board, seemingly lost in thought. "Thanks for the game," Micah said, his voice quieter now, more thoughtful. "I didn't just learn from winning. I learned from how you played. You're really good." That was tough. Kayla looked at him, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You've got guts, Micah," she said, standing up and offering him a handshake. "You earned this one." As their hands met, Micah felt a sense of closure. This game, this challenge, had changed everything. Not just for him, but for Kayla as well. She had been the top player in the school, and now, he was the one who had dethroned her. But it wasn't just about the title anymore. It was about the respect they had gained for each other through their rivalry. They had both pushed each other to be better. But Micah knew that this victory was more than just about chess. It was about something deeper, something he had only begun to understand. As he walked away from the park, a sense of peace washed over him. The pressure, the doubt, the fear of failure, it had all been worth it. He had taken on the challenge, and he had come out stronger on the other side. No matter what happened next, no matter how many more games he played, he had already won. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The day after the game, Micah sat in his bedroom, the faint sound of traffic drifting through his window as the world outside carried on. His mind was still racing. The victory against Kayla Sinclair was something he hadn't expected, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized it wasn't just about the game anymore. It was a moment of transformation. The entire experience had awakened something in him, a deeper understanding of who he was, what he was capable of, and the power of resilience. But there was also a nagging feeling in the back of his mind, something he couldn't quite shake. He had spent so much time focusing on beating Kayla, on proving something to himself, that he hadn't fully considered what the win really meant. It wasn't just a badge of honor, it was a sign of his growth, but that growth had come with its own set of challenges. Winning didn't erase the struggles, the moments of doubt, or the feeling that maybe this wasn't the end. It was just another beginning. Micah stared at the small chess set on his desk, the pieces neatly arranged in front of him. He had beaten Kayla. He had beaten one of the best. But now, with the win behind him, what was left? He knew there was still so much to learn, so many ways he could improve. And that realization hit him hard. The door to his room creaked open, and Micah turned to see his sister, Erica, standing there, leaning against the frame with a soft smile on her face. "I saw what happened yesterday," she said, her voice warm. "I heard about the game. You did great, Micah." Micah smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, I did. But I don't know. It just feels different now. Like I've won, but there's still something I'm missing. You know." Erica walked over and sat down beside him on the bed, her expression thoughtful. "I get it," she said softly. "You won, but it doesn't fix everything, right? It doesn't mean you've figured it all out. Winning doesn't always bring the closure we expect. It just shows how far you've come." Micah nodded, staring at his hands. "I'm not sure where to go from here. I feel like I've learned everything I can from playing against Kayla. What's next? What do I need to do now to get better?" Erica paused, choosing her words carefully. "Micah, this is the point where most people give up. They think they've hit the top, so why keep going? But this is the hardest part, the part where you need to realize that learning never stops. Chess is a never-ending game, but so is life. You can keep pushing forward, but you have to find new challenges. You have to ask yourself, what are you really playing for?" Micah looked at her, the question hanging in the air. "What am I really playing for?" Erica smiled, tapping the chessboard lightly. "It's not just about the pieces or the victories, Micah. It's about the journey. It's about pushing yourself to be better, not just at chess, but at everything you do. It's about finding the right moves for the life you want to live. And that requires more than just strategy, it requires heart, it requires understanding the people you care about, and knowing when to make the hard decisions, even when they seem impossible." Micah thought about her words for a long moment. He had always seen chess as a game of logic, of careful planning. But Erica's words made him realize that the lessons from the game were much deeper. His battle against Kayla wasn't just about the pieces on the board. It was about learning how to navigate life's uncertainties. It was about making tough decisions, handling setbacks, and understanding that no victory, no matter how sweet, could solve everything. For the first time, Micah began to understand what Erica had been telling him all along. Winning wasn't the end of the story. It was just another chapter. And each new chapter would require more growth, more self-reflection, and more resilience. "Thanks, Erica," Micah said quietly, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. "I guess I've been so focused on the game, I forgot that there's more to life than just winning." Erica chuckled softly. "Don't get me wrong, victories feel amazing. But it's what you do after that matters most. What will you do with your next move? That's what counts." As Micah processed her words, he knew she was right. The victory against Kayla had been important, but it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a new phase in his journey. Now, he needed to decide how to use everything he had learned, not just about chess, but about himself. The next day, as Micah walked to school, his thoughts were still swirling. He hadn't fully processed everything that Erica had said, but he knew that he had a lot more to figure out. He still had dreams, big ones, of becoming a chess grandmaster, of one day entering national tournaments and proving to everyone that he was more than just a kid who learned to play chess in a neighborhood park. But even as he thought about those dreams, something else occurred to him. He needed to focus more on the present. He needed to embrace the small victories, the ones that made the journey worthwhile. When he arrived at school, his friends greeted him with high fives and congratulations. They had all heard about the game, and they were proud of him. But as Micah walked through the halls, he realized something. This wasn't the applause he had been seeking. It wasn't the validation he needed. What mattered was the quiet, personal satisfaction that came from knowing he had pushed through his doubts, his fear of failure, and his insecurities. Winning the game against Kayla was just one step. He still had so much left to learn, and it wasn't just about chess. Later that day, after school had ended, Micah sat at the park again, the same spot where it had all begun. His eyes scanned the chessboard, but this time, his focus was different. He wasn't looking for his next move, he was thinking about his next step, both in the game and in life. He wasn't just playing against Kayla anymore. He was playing against himself. And for the first time, Micah Reed understood what it truly meant to be a player in both the game and in life. Micah had always been used to taking the familiar path. It was easy, predictable, and comforting. He had his friends, his school, his routine, life felt like a series of small victories he could control. But as the days passed since his win against Kayla, something in him had shifted. The victory was still sweet, but it was no longer the focal point of his existence. He was beginning to feel the weight of his own potential, like there was something much bigger awaiting him, something that couldn't be achieved by staying in his comfort zone. The feeling grew stronger each day. He had beaten Kayla, but that was just one challenge. What came next? He could feel a new chapter of his life opening before him, and it was one he wasn't sure he was ready to walk down. But there was no turning back. It was the beginning of fall now, and the crisp air carried a sense of change, of new possibilities. Micah found himself standing in front of the school chess club one afternoon, a small group of students gathering around, quietly chatting and laughing. He had been invited to join more than once, but for some reason, the idea of being part of something bigger than himself, something that involved a commitment beyond the occasional park game, felt intimidating. As he stepped inside, the room was buzzing with excitement. Posters of past tournaments lined the walls, and the unmistakable sound of pieces clicking against the board filled the air. It was a different atmosphere than he was used to, more formal, more serious. But it also felt alive with potential, and Micah couldn't help but feel both excited and nervous. The club president, a tall, confident senior named Ethan Parker, spotted him right away. Ethan was a state champion, known for his quick wit and strategic mind. Everyone in the club respected him, and Micah had heard rumors that he might soon enter national competitions. "Micah, right?" Ethan called out, his voice filled with warmth. Glad you could join us today. I've heard about your game against Kayla. Impressive. Micah smiled, a little embarrassed but thankful for the recognition. Thanks, Ethan. I didn't expect to win, but it felt good to finally get a win like that. That's the thing about chess, Ethan said, leading Micah over to an empty seat at one of the tables. You never know when you'll have your breakthrough. But you have to be ready for it. And sometimes, it takes more than just playing a few games here and there. You've got to challenge yourself, push yourself further than you think you can go. Micah sat down, listening carefully. He had always admired Ethan's confidence, but now, hearing those words, he felt the weight of their truth. Chess wasn't just a game. It was a constant challenge, a battle against his own limitations. It was about growth, personal growth, intellectual growth, emotional growth. I know it's a big step, Ethan continued, his eyes steady on Micah. But this club could be a good place for you. We're all about improving our skills here, learning from each other, and pushing ourselves to new heights. If you're serious about getting better, this is where you need to be. Micah felt a surge of excitement in his chest. He had always thought of himself as a casual player, someone who enjoyed the game but didn't take it too seriously. But what if this was his chance to do something more? What if this was the moment he could finally take control of his destiny, to be part of something bigger than just a park game or a schoolyard rivalry? I'm in, Micah said, the words flowing more easily than he had expected. I want to learn. I want to push myself. I think it's time. Ethan smiled, clapping him on the back. That's the spirit. Let's see what you've got, Micah. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of new experiences and challenges. Micah immersed himself in the chess club, attending every meeting and participating in the club's tournaments. He faced players who were much more skilled than he had ever encountered, and each loss stung in a way he hadn't anticipated. But with each defeat came a lesson, a chance to reflect, to grow, and to come back stronger. Kayla, who had been absent from school for a few days after their game, eventually returned. She didn't mention their match immediately, and Micah didn't feel the need to bring it up either. But one afternoon, during a break in the club meeting, she approached him with a shy smile. I heard you joined the chess club, she said, her voice soft but sincere. That's awesome. I'm glad to see you taking things seriously. Micah glanced at her, surprised. The competitive edge they had shared during their rivalry seemed to have faded, replaced by a sense of mutual respect. Yeah, I think it's time to step it up. I want to get better. Kayla nodded, her eyes thoughtful. I've been thinking the same thing. I'm planning to enter some tournaments this year. Maybe we can play again sometime, not for a rematch, but just to see how far we've both come. The idea of playing her again, this time, not as a challenge, but as two players pushing each other to grow, felt right. Micah had no idea how the next game between them would turn out, but he didn't care. It wasn't about proving himself anymore. It was about pushing himself to be the best version of who he could be. As the months passed, Micah found himself faced with a new realization. He wasn't just playing chess to win anymore. He was playing to discover who he was, what he was capable of, and how much he could grow, not just on the board, but in life. His friends in the chess club were becoming more than just teammates. They were his allies in a shared journey, each of them facing their own battles and learning to rise above their limitations. They pushed each other, encouraged each other, and celebrated every small victory together. And for the first time, Micah didn't feel like he was walking this road alone. The road less traveled, the one filled with uncertainty, hard work, and sacrifices, was becoming clearer with every move he made. He wasn't just a boy who had beaten a top player in a random park game. He was a player on a bigger stage now, and he was ready to face whatever came next. As the days grew shorter and the school year pressed on, Micah found himself deeper within the rhythm of the chess club. What had started as a place for occasional play had become a foundation of his everyday life. Each meeting was a chance to challenge himself, to break down his weaknesses, and to push forward with new strategies. But it wasn't just the game itself that had transformed, it was the people around him, the experiences, and the lessons that seemed to surface when he least expected them. It was early November when a new member joined the club. At first, Micah didn't think much of it, another player, possibly just there to fill a seat. But as the person took a seat at the far end of the room, he noticed something different. This person wasn't like the others. They weren't intimidated by the seasoned members or by the weight of past victories. Instead, they exuded quiet confidence, a kind of calm that was contagious. Her name was Mrs. Andrea Harlow, and she was not your typical chess club member. She wasn't a student. She was an adult, in her mid-30s, with sharp, calculating eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She had just moved into town, and word around the school was that she was an experienced chess coach, someone who had spent years training top-level players. The chess club had invited her to attend a few sessions to help mentor the group, but no one could have predicted the impact she would have. Micah first noticed her during one of the club's practice matches. She didn't play in the usual competitive sense, no, she moved around the room, observing the games with a cool, analytical eye. She would stop for a moment, peer over someone's shoulder, and offer a simple piece of advice. Don't rush it. Chess is like life. It's not about speed, it's about the quality of the decision, she'd tell one player who had just made a reckless move. The way she spoke, with such calm assurance, made Micah stop in his tracks. He had heard similar advice before, but something about her presence, her manner, felt different. There was a wisdom to her words, a depth he couldn't quite grasp yet. After a few weeks, Mrs. Harlow began to take a more active role in mentoring the club. One day, she approached Micah during a break in the session. She had watched him for a while, observing the way he played and how he approached the game, and now, she was ready to give him her first real piece of advice. Micah, she said, her voice low but steady, I've been watching you for a while. You've got a lot of potential, but you're not fully embracing the most important lesson of chess. You think it's all about making the right moves, about outsmarting your opponent. But there's more to it. It's about understanding your opponent, understanding yourself. Chess is a reflection of life. It's about patience, strategy, and, above all, making the right sacrifices at the right time. Micah looked at her, puzzled. Sacrifices? Like giving up a piece to win? She smiled faintly, as if she had been waiting for that question. Yes, exactly. But not just in the game. Life works the same way. There are moments when you have to let go of something to move forward, to gain something more valuable down the road. It's a hard lesson to learn, but it's essential. You'll encounter many moments in your life, Micah, where you'll have to decide whether to hold on to what you have or let go to achieve something greater. Her words lingered in his mind long after their conversation ended. He knew what she meant, but he hadn't fully understood it yet. It was one thing to sacrifice a pawn or a knight on the chessboard, it was another to apply that concept to real life. What could he possibly need to sacrifice, and for what? Was it time? Relationships? The things he loved most? He wasn't sure, but the idea gnawed at him. The next few days felt heavy with the weight of that question. He began to observe the other members of the club, noting how they played the game with a sense of calm and purpose, their moves deliberate, their strategies grounded in a bigger picture. He realized he had been rushing through his games, trying to win quickly, to prove himself. But Mrs. Harlow was right, there was no rush in chess. And if he was going to improve, he needed to change his approach. One afternoon, Micah found himself seated across from Ethan, the club president. They were in the middle of a practice match, and Micah had been playing more carefully, thoughtfully, considering each move with new deliberation. But halfway through the game, he found himself faced with a tough decision. Ethan had trapped one of his more valuable pieces, and if he didn't make the right move, it could cost him the game. Micah froze. His instinct was to move quickly, to rescue the peace and regain control. But he remembered Mrs. Harlowe's words. Sacrifice. Patience. Strategy. With a deep breath, he let go of the piece, sacrificing it, not to lose, but to open the door for a more powerful move later. Ethan raised an eyebrow, surprised by the move. You sure about that one, Micah? I think so, Micah replied, his voice steady. It wasn't until several moves later that Ethan realized what Micah had done. By giving up that piece, Micah had set up a combination that forced Ethan into a defensive position, ultimately leading to a checkmate. Micah had won, but it wasn't the win that filled him with pride. It was the realization that he had embraced the lesson he was still learning. Sometimes, the best way forward was to let go of what you think is important in the short term to gain something greater. After the game, Ethan clapped him on the back. Nice move, man. I didn't see that coming. Micah smiled, his heart racing with a new understanding. Thanks, Ethan. I think I'm starting to get it. That evening, as Micah sat at his desk, reflecting on the game, he felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. The pressure to win, to prove himself, had faded away. What mattered now was the journey, the lessons, and the growth. He thought about Mrs. Harlowe and her words about sacrifice. He thought about his own life, his family, his friends, his future. What sacrifices was he willing to make? What was he willing to let go of to achieve something greater? As he sat there, lost in thought, he realized something important. The road ahead would never be easy. It would be filled with challenges, setbacks, and difficult decisions. But now, he understood that it wasn't about avoiding the sacrifices, it was about making them with purpose, knowing that sometimes, letting go of one thing opened up the possibility of something greater. Micah wasn't just playing a game of chess anymore. He was playing the game of life, and he was finally ready to make the moves that would shape his future. As winter settled in and the cold air filled the halls of the school, the chess club buzzed with anticipation. Micah had felt the slow burn of change ever since Mrs. Harlowe's lessons, but now, that feeling was shifting into something more intense, the pressure of expectations. It had started with the school's announcement of an upcoming regional chess tournament. The event was more than just a competition, it was a chance for the best players in the area to showcase their skills and possibly earn a spot in the state finals. For Micah, this wasn't just another casual game. It was a test, a moment to prove to himself, to his club, and to his mentor, Mrs. Harlowe, that he was more than just the boy who won an impromptu match against Kayla. In the days leading up to the tournament, Micah could feel the weight of it all. Every practice felt more intense. Every move on the board held more meaning. He couldn't afford to waste time anymore. His fellow club members, including Kayla, were all getting ready in their own way. Some were cool and confident, others were showing their nerves in subtle ways, but all of them shared the same goal, to win. And Micah, for the first time, felt like he truly belonged in that group. Mrs. Harlowe had taken a hands-on approach in preparing the club. She had become more of a mentor than a casual observer, sitting down with each player, giving them personalized feedback, and pushing them to reach their highest potential. She was stern but encouraging, holding them to a high standard, knowing that with the right discipline, the group could do more than just participate, they could win. Micah had spent hours over the past few weeks preparing for the tournament. His once impulsive playing style had transformed into something more deliberate, more calculated. He no longer rushed his moves, and the strategic advice Mrs. Harlowe had given him was starting to make sense. Sacrifice wasn't just about giving up a piece, it was about having the vision to see beyond the immediate loss and understanding how the sacrifice would lead to something greater. Despite his progress, the weight of the pressure was heavy. Every time he walked into the club, every time he faced a new opponent in practice, there was a growing sense of expectation. He couldn't help but feel the eyes of the others on him. They saw him as the kid who had taken down Kayla, the rising star, and now, he had to live up to that reputation. One afternoon, as Micah sat at the club's main table, running through a series of endgame tactics with Ethan, his mind wandered. He had grown used to the practice sessions and the drills, but the upcoming tournament loomed over him like a storm cloud, threatening to break at any moment. "Micah, what's on your mind?" Ethan's voice snapped him back to reality. "I don't know," Micah said, rubbing his forehead. "It's just, this tournament. It's bigger than I thought it would be. Everyone expects me to do well, and I'm not sure I can handle that." Ethan leaned back in his chair, considering Micah's words carefully. "I get it. The pressure is real. But you've been preparing for this moment for a long time. You've got the skills. The only thing holding you back now is your own doubt. You can't let that get in the way." Micah sighed, glancing around the room. The rest of the club was scattered around, practicing their own matches or discussing strategies. Everyone was preparing, but Micah couldn't help but feel alone in his own doubts. "I know," he said quietly. "It's just, what if I fail? What if I let everyone down?" "You're not going to fail," Ethan said with a grin, his confidence unwavering. "And even if you don't win, it's not about letting anyone down. It's about learning, growing, and pushing yourself. That's what Mrs. Harlow's been teaching us all along." Micah nodded, but the anxiety in his chest didn't subside. He had worked so hard to get here, but the fear of falling short lingered. Later that evening, as Micah walked home from school, he couldn't shake the weight of his thoughts. The cold wind bit at his face, but the chill in his heart was far worse. He had always prided himself on being a quick learner, someone who could adapt and overcome. But this tournament was different. This wasn't just about adapting. It was about surviving the pressure. He had to step into a world where every move mattered, and there would be no second chances. When he arrived home, his mother was sitting in the living room, as usual, reading her book and sipping her tea. She looked up as he entered, noticing the tension in his posture. "Hey, Micah. You okay?" she asked, her voice soft but concerned. Micah hesitated, unsure of how to express the mess of emotions he was feeling. "I don't know, Mom. I've been practicing, but this tournament, it feels like it's everything. And I don't know if I can live up to everyone's expectations." His mother put down her book, her eyes kind but firm. "Micah, you've always put pressure on yourself, haven't you? You want to be the best, and that's great. But remember something, it's not the outcome that defines you. It's the effort. It's the journey you've taken to get to this point." He met her gaze, trying to understand her words. "But what if the effort isn't enough? What if I fail?" "Failure isn't the end, son," she said, her voice full of conviction. "It's a lesson. What matters is how you pick yourself back up. I've seen you grow, not just in chess, but in life. You're not the same boy who walked into that park and played Kayla. You're better, stronger, and wiser. Trust that. Trust yourself." Her words lingered with him long after he went to bed. As Micah lay in the darkness, his mind racing with thoughts of the tournament, he realized something important. The pressure wasn't coming from the club or the tournament. It was coming from within himself. He had placed the weight of expectation on his own shoulders, convinced that anything less than perfection was failure. But maybe his mom was right. Maybe it wasn't about winning every game. Maybe it was about being present in the moment, about learning from each step, no matter where it led. He took a deep breath, letting her words settle into his mind. The next day, he would go to the tournament, prepared not just to win, but to learn, to grow, and to embrace whatever came his way. The morning of the tournament arrived with an air of nervous excitement. Micah could feel the weight of the day pressing down on him as he stood at the front door of his house, his chest set neatly packed in his bag, his uniform freshly pressed. His mother had given him an encouraging smile when he left, reminding him to stay calm and focused. "You've got this, Micah. Just remember, no matter what happens today, you've already made us proud." But her words didn't quell the anxiety building in his chest. He had worked so hard to get here, and now that the moment was finally upon him, he wasn't sure if he was ready. The regional tournament was a big deal, not just for him, but for his entire school's chess club. For the first time, they had a real shot at winning something meaningful. As he entered the tournament hall, Micah was immediately struck by the scale of the event. Rows of tables were lined up, each with 2 players and their chess boards, their eyes focused and intent on the game in front of them. The hum of quiet conversation, the shuffle of pieces, and the soft ticking of clocks filled the air. It was a world of intense concentration, where every move could mean the difference between victory and defeat. He spotted Mrs. Harlow at the far side of the room, speaking with a few other coaches, her sharp eyes scanning the room. When she saw Micah, she gave him a subtle nod, a silent reminder that she was there for him. The tournament was structured in a series of rounds, and Micah's first opponent was a tall, quiet boy named Daniel from another school. He was one of the top-ranked players in the region, known for his tactical prowess. Micah had heard about him before. He was a formidable opponent, one who had a reputation for methodically breaking down his adversaries. The pressure of playing such a seasoned competitor was heavy, but Micah steeled himself. He could do this. He had to. The game began, and Micah immediately found himself under pressure. Daniel's moves were precise, almost mechanical. He took his time, carefully considering every step he made. Micah, on the other hand, felt like his moves were rushed, as if the very air in the room was pushing him forward, urging him to act before it was too late. Each move Daniel made seemed to put Micah on the defensive. The pieces fell one by one, and for a brief moment, Micah felt himself losing grip on the game. His mind raced, trying to recall everything he had learned, every piece of advice Mrs. Harlow had given him. Sacrifice. Patience. Strategy. But as the game wore on, Micah started to feel something click. Slowly, he began to see Daniel's strategy. He started to anticipate his opponent's moves, to read the patterns in his play. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was thinking ahead. And then, in the heat of the moment, he remembered a lesson Mrs. Harlow had taught him. Sometimes, winning a game wasn't about overpowering your opponent, it was about using their strengths against them. With this new perspective, Micah made a daring move. He sacrificed a piece, his queen, to be exact, knowing that it would leave him vulnerable. Daniel, who had been so focused on gaining the advantage, took the bait. He moved forward, capturing the queen and setting himself up for what he believed would be an easy checkmate. But in that moment, Micah saw it. The opening he had been waiting for. He quickly repositioned his remaining pieces, launching a counterattack. Daniel's eyes widened in surprise as Micah placed him in check. For the first time in the match, the balance of power shifted. What had seemed like an easy victory for Daniel was now a struggle. Micah's heart pounded in his chest as he made his next moves with precision. Each piece fell into place like the last piece of a puzzle, and with one final move, he checkmated Daniel. The room was silent for a moment, and then the realization hit: Micah had won. He blinked, almost in disbelief. Had he really just beaten Daniel, the top-ranked player, in his first match of the tournament? A wave of triumph washed over him, but it was quickly replaced with a rush of adrenaline. There was no time to bask in the victory. He had to keep moving, to stay focused. Daniel extended his hand, a genuine smile on his face. "Good game, man. You got me there." That queen sacrifice was a bold move. Micah shook his hand, still feeling the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Thanks, it was close. You played really well." With that, he stepped away from the board, his heart still racing. He found Mrs. Harlow in the crowd and caught her eye. She gave him a small nod of approval, but there was no time for celebration. The tournament wasn't over, and there were still many more rounds to go. The next few hours were a blur of games. Micah moved through each round with a new sense of confidence. His opponents varied in skill and style, but each one tested him in different ways. Some played aggressively, others defensively, but Micah found himself adapting, relying on his growing ability to read the game and anticipate his opponent's moves. By the time he reached the semi-finals, Micah was exhausted but focused. His mind had sharpened over the course of the tournament, and each victory felt like a small triumph over his own doubts and fears. But now, with the final rounds looming, the pressure was mounting once again. The idea of facing Kayla, his old rival from the chess club, kept nagging at him. They had faced off before, but never in a setting like this. What if they were to meet in the final match? What if it came down to them, the two players who had once battled for dominance in the school club, now fighting for the ultimate prize? Micah shook his head, pushing the thought away. He couldn't worry about that. Not yet. The semi-final match was against another formidable opponent, a girl named Sarah, who had breezed through her matches with ease. She was calm, collected, and had a style that reminded Micah of Mrs. Harlow, thoughtful and precise, never rushing. The game was long and grueling, each side exchanging blows, each player trying to outmaneuver the other. Sarah was a fierce competitor, but Micah's newfound confidence and tactical awareness kept him in the game. In the end, it came down to one final move, just like in the first match against Daniel. Micah had Sarah cornered. He could feel the checkmate coming, the excitement building. He saw the opening, made his move, and watched as Sarah's king was trapped. It was over. He had won again. The tension in the air was palpable as Micah sat at the edge of the room, waiting for the next match. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, and every few seconds, he could hear the quiet shuffle of feet and the soft murmur of conversation from the crowd of spectators. It was almost as though the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to happen. He had made it to the finals. Micah couldn't believe it. His hands were slightly trembling as he sat, his mind racing through the game, calculating his next move, thinking ahead, trying to prepare for what was coming. The journey had been tough, the games exhausting, but now it all led to this moment. It wasn't just about the tournament anymore. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving to himself that he had what it took, that he wasn't the same kid who had once doubted his abilities. As he glanced around the room, his eyes landed on her. Kayla. She was sitting across the room, waiting for her own semi-final match to finish. Kayla had always been his rival, ever since their first clash in the school chess club. They had faced each other numerous times, but this was different. This was the ultimate stage. This was the one match that could define everything. Micah's heart pounded as he watched her. She was calm, focused, her expression unreadable. He couldn't help but wonder what she was thinking. Did she feel the same pressure that he did? Did she feel the same weight of expectation hanging over her? As if reading his thoughts, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Mrs. Harlow. "You're doing great, Micah. Stay focused. Trust yourself. This is your moment." Micah smiled at the encouragement. It was the same advice she had given him countless times throughout their lessons. Trust yourself. He had heard it so many times, but now it felt different. It felt like the truth. Kayla's match ended soon after, and the room's energy shifted. The crowd began to quiet down as the final two players took their places at the main board. Micah stood, walking toward the table where his destiny awaited. Kayla was already sitting at the board, her eyes sharp and calculating. She gave him a small, respectful nod, a silent acknowledgement of their shared history. Micah returned the nod, his mind focused. There would be no time for old rivalries, no time for games. It was just him and her now, on this stage, with everything on the line. The referee signaled for the game to begin. "Good luck, Micah," Kayla said, her voice steady but not without a hint of competitive fire. "You too," he replied. His voice was steady, but inside, his heart was racing. This was the moment. The first few moves were expected, opening plays that both players knew well. Kayla, as always, was methodical in her approach, never rushing, never showing signs of doubt. Micah, on the other hand, was filled with a mix of excitement and nerves, but he quickly settled into the rhythm of the game. He focused on the board, remembering Mrs. Harlow's lessons. Patience. Strategy. Sacrifice. Every move was calculated, each piece placed with purpose. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he started to see the patterns in Kayla's game. She was aggressive, pushing forward with an almost reckless abandon, but there was a flaw in her strategy, a vulnerability he could exploit if he played carefully enough. Minutes passed like hours, the intensity building as they exchanged moves. Kayla advanced her pieces, seemingly confident, while Micah took his time, considering every possible outcome. His mind was clear now, no longer clouded by doubt. He trusted in his training, his instincts, and his ability to read the game. Kayla's first major mistake came when she overextended her knight, leaving it vulnerable to a sudden attack. Micah seized the opportunity. With a quick movement, he captured the knight and shifted the momentum of the game. Kayla's expression flickered for a brief moment, a sign of her surprise, but she quickly regained her composure. For the first time in the game, Micah felt a shift in the air. The tide was turning. Kayla, however, wasn't about to back down. She adjusted her strategy, playing more cautiously now, trying to regain control. But Micah had the upper hand. He could feel it, this was his chance. Every piece he moved brought him closer to victory, and Kayla seemed to be getting more defensive, reacting rather than dictating the flow of the game. It was almost as if the roles had reversed. He wasn't the underdog anymore. He wasn't the kid who had played recklessly and gotten lucky. He was a player, a strategist, and he was finally seeing the game unfold the way he wanted it to. The crowd around them was silent now, the tension thick in the air. Each move was watched closely, analyzed by spectators and other players alike. But Micah wasn't focused on them. He was focused on the board, on Kayla's pieces, on the way her eyes flickered with frustration each time he outmaneuvered her. He could feel it, his moment was coming. Then, it happened. Kayla made her final mistake. She moved her queen into a position that left her king open to a check. Micah saw the opening immediately and didn't hesitate. He moved his rook into position, placing her king in check. Kayla's face tightened. She moved quickly to block the check, but it was too late. Micah had set her up. In one final, calculated move, he checkmated her. The room went silent for a brief moment before a wave of applause erupted. Micah sat back in his chair, feeling a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration. He had done it. He had beaten Kayla in the final round of the tournament. Kayla stood and extended her hand, a genuine smile on her face. "You played an amazing game, Micah. That was really something." Micah shook her hand, his own smile spreading across his face. "Thanks, Kayla. You're an incredible player. I've learned a lot from you." As he stood up to accept his trophy, Micah couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led him here. From the first match against Kayla in the school chess club to this moment, everything had changed. He wasn't just a boy who played chess. He was someone who had proven to himself that he could overcome doubts, face challenges, and rise to the occasion. And as he looked out at the crowd, his heart swelling with pride, he realized something important: this was just the beginning. The roar of applause echoed through the tournament hall, and Micah's heart was still racing as he stood at the center of the stage, the trophy now in his hands. It was a moment he had dreamed of, one he had worked tirelessly for. The weight of the trophy felt heavy, but in the best possible way. It wasn't just a symbol of victory, it was a testament to his journey, his perseverance, and his belief in himself. Around him, fellow players and spectators were clapping and congratulating him. Even Kayla, his fierce rival, was smiling, her competitive spirit still intact but tempered with respect. "You really earned that win," she said, her voice genuine despite the sting of defeat. "Thanks," Micah replied, his smile wide but humble. It wasn't easy, that's for sure. Mrs. Harlow stood nearby, her eyes full of pride. She approached him, her smile warm and approving. I knew you had it in you, Micah. You played a brilliant game. You've come so far. Micah's chest swelled with pride, but something lingered in the back of his mind. It wasn't just about winning the tournament anymore, it was about what came next. The trophy felt like the closing of one chapter, but there was still so much left unsaid, so many questions about what the future held. As the celebration continued around him, Micah found himself slipping into a quieter corner of the hall. He needed a moment to process everything that had just happened, to take it all in. He looked at the trophy in his hands, turning it over, feeling the smooth surface, the weight of the accomplishment. His thoughts kept drifting back to the journey it had taken to get here, all the struggles, the challenges, and the doubts that had nearly stopped him. But as the adrenaline began to subside, a question began to form in the back of his mind: what now? The victory was sweet, but was this the peak? Or was this just the beginning of something bigger? He had beaten Kayla, proven himself in a regional tournament, but the world of competitive chess was vast. And with that, he couldn't help but wonder, was he ready for what was coming next? Before he could dive too deep into his thoughts, a voice interrupted his musings. Micah, you've done something incredible today. But I hope you know, this is just the beginning. Micah turned around to find a man standing in front of him. He was tall, wearing a crisp black suit, with a confident and somewhat mysterious air about him. His smile was warm, but there was an intensity in his eyes that Micah couldn't quite place. Who are you? Micah asked, still a little taken aback by the sudden appearance of this stranger. My name is Marcus Williams, the man replied. I'm with the National Chess Association. I've been watching you play today. Micah's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. National Chess Association? What do you mean? I just won a local tournament. Marcus chuckled, the sound smooth and confident. Yes, but I can tell you've got potential. I've seen players with your level of skill before. And I'm here to offer you something. The words hung in the air between them, drawing Micah in with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. What do you mean, offer me something? Marcus's smile widened. A chance to go beyond this. A chance to compete on a much bigger stage. A scholarship for a spot in an elite chess academy. I think you're ready for it. The offer was startling. Micah had been so focused on the regional tournament that he hadn't even thought about what lay beyond it. To be scouted by someone from the National Chess Association, to have the opportunity to go to a chess academy, it was the kind of thing he had only seen on TV or heard about from older players. But the thought of leaving his school, his family, everything that was familiar, it made his stomach tighten. I don't know, Micah stammered. That sounds amazing, but I've never thought about something like that. It's a big decision. Marcus's expression softened. I understand. It's a lot to process, and you don't have to decide right away. But I think you should seriously consider it. You've got a future in chess, Micah. I've seen a lot of potential, and this could be your chance to take it to the next level. Micah was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of Marcus's words. He had always dreamed of bigger things, of becoming a chess grandmaster, of traveling the world to compete. But the thought of leaving behind his family, his friends, the life he had known, it felt like a huge leap into the unknown. Before he could respond, Mrs. Harlow appeared beside him. She had been watching from a distance, and Micah could see the concern in her eyes as she looked from him to Marcus. Is everything all right, Micah? She asked, her voice steady. Marcus turned to Mrs. Harlow, offering her a polite nod. I was just talking to Micah about an opportunity for him. I think he's got the potential to do great things, and I wanted to extend an offer to him. Mrs. Harlow's gaze shifted to Micah, her expression unreadable. She had always been a firm believer in letting Micah make his own decisions, but she also knew that this was a big one. Micah, she said carefully, this is a huge opportunity. But I want you to take your time. You don't need to make a decision right now. Micah nodded, grateful for her support. He felt torn, as if he were standing at a crossroads with no clear direction. Thanks, Mrs. Harlow, he said, the weight of his emotions showing in his voice. I'll leave you to think about it, Marcus said, offering Micah one last lingering look. Remember, this could be the start of something incredible. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Micah standing there, the trophy in his hand, a whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. He had just won a regional tournament, but was that enough? Was he ready for something bigger? He looked at Mrs. Harlow, who gave him a soft, knowing smile. You've come a long way, Micah. Whatever you decide, I know you'll make the right choice. Just remember, take your time. Don't rush. This is your future. Micah felt a sense of calm settle over him, but it was tempered by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The offer was tempting, but it was more than just the chance to compete in a bigger tournament. It was a shift in his life, a challenge that would pull him away from everything he had known. As the celebration continued, Micah stepped back, taking a deep breath. The journey was far from over. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to take that next step. He just needed to figure out what that next step was. The days after the tournament flew by in a blur. Micah had barely been able to focus on anything other than the offer Marcus Williams had made him. Each time he picked up the trophy, it reminded him of the journey he had taken to get here, but now, holding it felt different. It wasn't just a symbol of his triumph, it felt like a reminder of a decision that was looming over him, one that would change his life forever. Micah had tried to push the thoughts aside, diving into schoolwork and hanging out with his friends to avoid thinking too much about it. But the more time passed, the more the reality of the situation began to sink in. The National Chess Academy, the scholarship, the chance to compete at a national level, the possibility of becoming one of the best players in the world. It was a dream, but it was also terrifying. You know you don't have to do this, his best friend, Eli, said one evening as they sat on the front porch of Micah's house. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow across the sky. They were sitting in the comfortable silence that had always been a part of their friendship, but now, Micah could feel the weight of the conversation pressing down on them. Micah ran his hand through his hair, staring at the ground. I know. But I've worked so hard for this, Eli. And I feel like if I don't take this chance, I might regret it forever. Eli was quiet for a moment, thinking. But what about everything here? Your family, your friends, your life as it is now. You'd have to leave all that behind. Micah's stomach tightened at the thought. He had always been close to his family, especially his mom. She had supported him through every late-night study session, every chess match, every moment of doubt. The thought of being away from her, from everything familiar, made his chest ache. And then there was his neighborhood, his friends, the people who had always been there for him. I don't know, Micah admitted. It's all so much to think about. I've never really been away from home for more than a few days, and this would be huge. Eli nodded slowly. It's a big step, man. But don't let fear keep you from something you might really want. I've seen you play. I know how good you are. This could be your chance to do something incredible. Micah let out a breath, trying to wrap his mind around it all. I don't want to lose everything I have here, Eli. I don't want to end up feeling like I'm giving up something important just for the chance to play chess. Yeah, but what if you're not giving it up? Eli said. What if you're just opening up a new chapter, one that could help you grow, and maybe even come back to help others? You could come back and teach the next generation of players. You wouldn't be abandoning anyone. Micah hadn't thought of it like that. The idea of returning to his community, not as a kid who had to leave to make something of himself, but as someone who could give back, started to feel like a possibility. He stood up, pacing back and forth, his mind racing. I'm scared, Eli. I'm scared that if I go, I'll fail. Or that I'll miss everything I know, and it'll be too late to go back. You won't fail, Micah. You've already proven yourself. But you won't know what you can achieve unless you take the leap. Micah stopped pacing, looking at his best friend. Eli's words hit him in a way that he hadn't expected. He had always been so focused on the safety of the familiar, the comfort of the life he knew. But Eli was right. How could he know what he was capable of if he didn't take a risk? How could he grow if he didn't step into the unknown? That night, Micah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The thoughts about the academy kept swirling in his mind, the offer from Marcus Williams, the possibility of being a part of something bigger. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the decision wasn't just about chess. It was about him, about his growth, his future, and his ability to push past his fears. The decision to go wasn't going to be easy, but he knew one thing: if he stayed in his comfort zone, he might miss the chance to become something more. And that, he couldn't live with. The next morning, Micah made his decision. He walked into the kitchen, where his mom was making breakfast. She looked up at him, a soft smile on her face. "Morning, champ. How are you feeling?" "Mom," Micah said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've been thinking a lot about the offer. About everything." His mom set down the spatula and turned to him, her eyes warm but expectant. "I know it's been on your mind a lot lately. And I can tell it's a big decision. So what have you decided?" Micah hesitated, but only for a moment. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the offer. I'm going to go to the academy." For a moment, his mom was silent. Then, a smile spread across her face, and she walked over to him, pulling him into a hug. "I'm so proud of you, Micah. I know this isn't easy, but I believe in you. This is your chance to do something amazing. And we'll be here for you, no matter what." Tears welled up in Micah's eyes. He had been so afraid of leaving, but now, in this moment, he realized that his mom's support gave him the courage he needed. "I'll miss you," Micah whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll miss you too, but you'll do great things. And remember, this is just the beginning." Micah nodded, feeling a sense of relief flood over him. It was scary, yes. But it also felt right. He was stepping into the unknown, but he wasn't doing it alone. He had his family, his friends, and his dreams to guide him. And that was enough. He called Marcus later that day, his decision made. "I'm in," he said, his voice steady. "I'm ready to take the next step." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Marcus's voice returned, full of enthusiasm. "That's fantastic, Micah. We'll start the paperwork, and I'll get everything set up for you. You're going to do great things, I can feel it." And just like that, a new chapter began. The morning air was crisp, and the sun was just beginning to rise as Micah stood on the doorstep of his home, his suitcase packed beside him. He could feel his heart beating in his chest, loud and fast, as the reality of what he was about to do set in. Today was the day he was leaving. Today was the day everything would change. His mom stood beside him, her arms around him in a tight embrace, as if holding on for just a little longer before she had to let go. Micah could feel the warmth of her love, but also the sorrow in her touch. She had always been there for him, supporting his dreams, guiding him when things got tough. And now, she was sending him off on a new journey. One that would take him far from home. "I'm so proud of you, Micah," his mom whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know this isn't easy, but you've worked so hard for this. And I know you're going to do great things. Just remember, no matter how far you go, you're always our champion." Micah fought back the lump in his throat. His mom had always been his biggest supporter, and the thought of leaving her, leaving everything behind, filled him with a mixture of excitement and fear. "I'll miss you, Mom," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't know what I'll do without you." She pulled back slightly, looking him in the eyes, her smile tender but strong. "You'll be just fine, Micah. You've got the strength to make it through anything. And remember, we're always just a phone call away." Micah nodded, his heart swelling with love and gratitude for everything his mom had done for him. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't alone. Eli appeared beside him, his usual grin on his face but something more serious in his eyes. "You ready to go, man?" he asked, his tone both excited and comforting. "I think so," Micah replied, a nervous laugh escaping him. "I mean, I've been thinking about it for so long, and now that it's actually happening, it feels surreal." "I get it," Eli said, clapping Micah on the back. "But you've got this. You've always had this. Go and show them what you're made of." The sound of a car pulling up interrupted their conversation, and Micah turned to see a sleek black sedan parked at the curb. Marcus Williams stepped out, his presence confident as ever. "Ready to head to the academy, Micah?" he asked with a smile. Micah nodded, his heart pounding again, but this time with anticipation. This was it. The next step in his journey. The unknown path he had chosen to walk. As he said his final goodbyes, he could feel the weight of the moment, the weight of leaving his home, his life, his comfort zone. But there was something else, too. Something lighter. A sense of possibility. A feeling that everything he had done so far, all the games, the losses, the victories, had led to this very moment. He climbed into the car, Marcus following suit. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and the car pulled away from the curb, the city he had always known slowly disappearing in the rearview mirror. His hometown was fading into the distance, but Micah felt no regret. Only excitement for what lay ahead. The drive was long, and for a while, Micah lost himself in the passing landscape, his mind racing with thoughts of the academy. He imagined the classrooms, the other students, the intense competition. He wondered what it would be like to compete on a national stage, to be surrounded by some of the best young minds in the world of chess. Would he be able to keep up? Would he fit in? Could he really take his game to the level he had always dreamed of? Marcus broke the silence, his voice calm and encouraging. "I know this is a big change for you, Micah. But I want you to remember that this is a new beginning, not an end. You're going to learn a lot here, about chess, yes, but also about yourself. This is a place where you'll be challenged, but also supported. You're going to grow in ways you can't even imagine yet." Micah looked over at Marcus, his words sinking in. He didn't know exactly what to expect from the academy, but he knew that it was a chance to become the player. And the person he had always wanted to be. This wasn't just about winning games anymore. It was about pushing himself, about seeing how far he could go, and finding out just how much he was capable of. After what felt like hours, the car finally pulled into the gates of the National Chess Academy. The sprawling campus was far grander than Micah had imagined, with tall buildings, manicured lawns, and students walking in groups, talking animatedly about strategies and matches. The sight filled him with awe, but also a sense of wonder. This was where his dream was beginning to take shape. This was where the next chapter of his life was unfolding. They parked in front of a large building with the Academy's logo emblazoned on the doors. Micah took a deep breath, looking up at the impressive structure. It was real. This was happening. His heart was pounding again, but now, there was a sense of purpose behind it. He wasn't just walking into an academy, he was stepping into his future. Marcus led him inside, where a warm reception awaited. The walls were lined with photos of former students who had gone on to become chess grandmasters, national champions, and world-renowned players. Micah felt a rush of excitement as he realized that, in a way, he was now a part of that legacy. "This is your new home, Micah," Marcus said, his voice filled with pride. "Welcome to the next step of your journey." As Micah looked around, he felt a surge of determination. He was ready for this. He had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but he knew that he was more than capable of facing them. He had earned his place here. And now, it was time to prove it. The first few days at the National Chess Academy were a whirlwind. Micah had barely had time to catch his breath as he adjusted to the new environment. The academy was nothing like he had imagined. It was bigger, busier, and more intense than anything he had experienced before. Everywhere he looked, there were students talking strategies, practicing with each other, and preparing for the next big competition. The atmosphere was electric, filled with an energy that made him feel both exhilarated and overwhelmed. Micah had spent most of his time settling in, getting used to his new routine, and exploring the massive campus. His room was simple, but it felt like a sanctuary in the midst of all the chaos. The walls were adorned with a few posters of his favorite chess grandmasters, but it wasn't long before the seriousness of his situation began to dawn on him. This wasn't a game anymore. This was his future. Every morning, he woke up early to attend his first set of lectures, which were taught by world-class chess coaches and former grandmasters. The subjects ranged from advanced strategies to psychological tactics, and Micah was amazed by the depth of knowledge these instructors possessed. The learning environment was incredibly competitive, and every student was expected to give their best. The pressure was on, but Micah thrived in it. He was determined to prove he belonged. But despite the whirlwind of activity and the constant focus on chess, Micah couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There was a quiet part of him that longed for the comfort of his old life. The familiarity of his mom's cooking, the easy laughter with Eli, and the streets of his neighborhood where he felt most at home. He had come to the academy for a reason, though, to push himself, to grow, and to see just how far his skills could take him. It wasn't long before the academy's first major tournament arrived. It was billed as the First Steps Tournament, a competition for the newest students to show what they were made of. The stakes weren't high in terms of prizes, but the tournament would be watched closely by coaches, scouts, and senior students, all looking to see who had the potential to make it to the next level. It was an unofficial introduction to the academy's true competitive environment. Micah felt a nervous excitement building inside him as the tournament neared. He had played in many competitions before, but this was different. This was the first real test of everything he had learned since arriving. The moment he sat at the chessboard, he knew that he wasn't just playing for himself. He was playing for the chance to show everyone, including himself, that he belonged here. As the tournament began, Micah's first opponent was a tall, confident girl named Sophia Collins. She was one of the Academy's rising stars, known for her aggressive, tactical play. Micah had watched her in practice a few times, and he knew that she would be a tough challenge. But he had trained hard, and he felt ready. The match started with a few quiet moves, each one calculated and precise. Micah kept his focus, his mind sharp as he considered every possibility. He was used to thinking several moves ahead, but against someone as skilled as Sophia, every decision felt like it mattered more than ever. Sophia smiled across the board, her eyes glinting with confidence. "I've been looking forward to this," she said, her voice calm but sharp. Micah didn't respond. He just focused on the game, blocking out the noise around him. He was determined to prove himself, not just to Sophia, but to everyone who had doubted him when they first heard about the kid from the streets who was making his way into the academy. This was his moment. The first few moves were simple enough, but soon, Sophia's aggressive tactics started to take shape. She pushed forward with rapid, decisive moves, aiming to trap him in a corner. Micah felt the pressure mounting as her pieces slowly advanced, but he remained calm. He had studied defensive strategies extensively, and he knew this was just part of the game. Then, a breakthrough moment came. Sophia made a slight mistake. She advanced her queen too aggressively, leaving a key piece unprotected. Micah spotted it immediately, his heart skipping a beat as he recognized the opportunity. Without hesitation, he moved his knight into position, forcing her to retreat and changing the entire flow of the game. Sophia frowned as she recalculated her position, realizing that she had underestimated him. But it wasn't over yet. Micah knew that one mistake didn't mean victory, it just meant a shift in momentum. He focused even harder, refusing to get distracted by the tension in the room. The moves continued, the sound of the chess clock ticking away in the background, a reminder of the urgency of every decision. The match seemed to stretch on forever, but Micah's mind was clear, his strategies unfolding like a well-oiled machine. He wasn't thinking of winning. He was thinking of playing the game the way it was meant to be played. Thinking several steps ahead, using every piece to its fullest potential. The tension in the air grew thicker as they reached the final stages of the game. Micah had an edge now, but Sophia wasn't giving up without a fight. Her counterattacks were sharp, and for a moment, Micah wondered if she would pull off a last-minute reversal. But then, with a steady hand, he placed his queen in a position that forced Sophia's king into check. There was nowhere to hide. "I've got you," Micah whispered to himself, almost inaudible, as the realization hit him. He had won. Sophia stared at the board, then at him, her eyes wide with surprise. She had been so sure of her victory, but Micah had outsmarted her, anticipating her moves and seizing his opportunity. Slowly, she reached out and extended her hand. "Good game," she said, her voice laced with both admiration and frustration. Micah shook her hand, his heart racing. "Good game," he replied, trying to hold back his excitement. As he stood up and walked away from the table, he couldn't help but smile. He had done it. Not just won the game, but proved something to himself. He wasn't just the kid from the neighborhood anymore. He was a player, someone who belonged on this stage. The tournament wasn't over yet, but Micah had already made his mark. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Micah won 2 more matches, both hard-fought and intense. Each victory brought him closer to the final round, but more importantly, it solidified his belief in himself. He was where he was meant to be. As the tournament ended and the final results were announced, Micah stood among the top 3 players. It wasn't a victory that would get him a trophy or a place on the national team just yet, but it was enough to catch the attention of his coaches and peers. The sense of pride he felt was overwhelming. He had made it, and it was just the beginning. Marcus Williams came over to him with a smile. "That was impressive, Micah. You've got something special." Micah's chest swelled with pride. "Thanks. It feels good to finally prove it." This wasn't just about chess. It was about proving to himself that he could do more, go further, and push past every doubt. It was about becoming the person he had always dreamed of being. And the road ahead, no matter how challenging, now seemed full of endless possibilities. Weeks passed, and the atmosphere at the National Chess Academy grew more intense with each day. Micah's victories in the First Steps tournament had earned him the respect of his peers and the attention of the coaches. He was no longer just another student, he was a contender, someone to watch out for. Yet, despite the recognition, Micah felt the pressure building in ways he hadn't anticipated. The academy wasn't just about learning, it was about competing. Every student here had one goal, to become a chess champion. The whispers of future tournaments, the expectations, the constant pressure to win, all of it weighed heavily on Micah. It wasn't just the competition with other students, it was the competition with himself. Every time he sat down at a chessboard, he felt the need to prove that his earlier success wasn't a fluke. That he truly belonged among the best. But with that pressure came something else, a fierce determination. Micah had always been driven by the desire to prove himself. Whether it was to his mom, his friends, or now, to himself, he was determined to become the best. And in order to do that, he had to rise above the fear, the self-doubt, and the overwhelming feeling that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't cut out for this after all. It was the night before the Academy's biggest event, the National Youth Chess Championship, a tournament that could change the course of Micah's career. His friends had been congratulating him, his coaches had been pushing him harder than ever, and even Marcus had pulled him aside for a final pep talk. "You've made it this far because you've got something that most people don't, heart," Marcus had told him. But heart alone won't win you this tournament. It'll take everything you've got. Every piece of your mind, every ounce of focus. Tomorrow is your chance to show them what you're made of. Micah nodded, though his nerves were starting to get the better of him. His mind was swirling with thoughts of the upcoming matches. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he faltered under the pressure? What if, after everything, he couldn't deliver? He tossed and turned in his bed that night, the tournament looming like a dark cloud. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the chessboard, the pieces moving in unpredictable ways, each scenario presenting a new challenge. The one thing that kept him awake, however, was the thought of his mom, of her pride and her belief in him. He thought about their last conversation, her words of encouragement still ringing in his ears, "You've got the strength to make it through anything." The tournament began the next morning, and Micah felt a mix of fear and anticipation gnawing at him as he stepped into the grand hall of the academy. The room was filled with competitors, each one with a sharp look in their eyes, each one as determined as he was. The energy was electric, but it was also overwhelming. The first few rounds went by quickly, and Micah handled each one with precision. The early matches were easy compared to what he had anticipated, but he couldn't let his guard down. His mind was always on the next move, always thinking ahead. He had to be perfect. There was no room for mistakes. The final match arrived faster than he expected. He was now one of the last two players standing, and across the table from him sat his biggest challenge of all, Sophia Collins. The same Sophia who had once beaten him in a practice match, the same Sophia who had been on his radar since day one. She was calm, poised, and deadly in her strategy. She was everything Micah had been striving to beat. Sophia sat across from him, her eyes cold and calculating. "You've done well to get this far," she said, her voice steady. "But I won't let you take this from me." Micah nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. This was it. The moment he had trained for. The match that would define everything. The championship. The room around them grew quieter as the game began. The sound of the clock ticking was the only noise that filled the space between them. Every move was a calculated risk, every decision a reflection of the countless hours he had spent studying, practicing, learning from his mistakes. Sophia's play was aggressive, as expected, and Micah quickly realized she was playing to overwhelm him, to push him into a corner where he would lose his composure. But Micah wasn't the same player he had been when he first walked into the academy. He had grown. He had learned. Slowly but surely, Micah began to shift the momentum. He baited her into traps, used his pieces with precision, and forced her into uncomfortable positions. The crowd around them watched in silence, knowing that this was the match of the tournament. The final moments of the game were a blur of tension, every move felt like an eternity. Then, it happened. Micah saw the opening, the one he had been waiting for. With a final, decisive move, he positioned his queen to deliver a checkmate. It was a clean win, one that left no room for argument. Sophia looked down at the board, her expression unreadable, and then slowly extended her hand across the table. "You played well," she said, her voice calm but filled with respect. Micah took her hand, his heart pounding in his chest. The crowd erupted into applause, but all he could hear was the sound of his own breath, steady and triumphant. He had done it. He had won. As he stood up from the table, a wave of emotion hit him. He had worked so hard for this moment. All the struggles, all the doubts, all the sacrifices, everything had led to this. His dream was no longer just a dream. He had become a champion. Marcus appeared beside him, his usual calm demeanor giving way to a broad smile. "I knew you had it in you," he said, clapping him on the back. "Well done, Micah. You're a true champion." Micah nodded, his eyes welling with tears. "I couldn't have done it without you." Later that evening, as the tournament came to a close and the celebrations began, Micah found a quiet corner by himself. He thought about everything he had gone through to get here, the struggles, the fears, the doubts. But more than anything, he thought about the lessons he had learned along the way. This victory wasn't just about a chess match. It was about growth. It was about believing in himself, even when everything seemed impossible. And most of all, it was about proving that no matter where you came from, you could achieve greatness if you had the heart to keep pushing forward. As the lights of the academy dimmed and the sound of music and laughter filled the air, Micah stood alone for a moment, looking out at the world he had just begun to conquer. And he knew, without a doubt, that this was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?